Sweet, we are live again. Trying to have another go on YouTube. So yeah, as always, we will be trying to get some debates going on this stream, and unfortunately it probably will be difficult, right? We will have to grow the channel first before it's going to be easy to get debates going. However, we do have some other options to consider. So yeah. One thing that we could do while, essentially waiting for the channel to grow and to get some debates on, we could literally just debate some AIs, right? That is an option which is very possible, right? There's lots of AIs on the internet, Grok, Gemini, ChatGPT, and we can just literally talk to all of them live, right? We can just do voice mode on them. So that is a good option. And why don't we try that out? Let's see how this actually ends up going. Okay, let's check it out. Let's have a look. Will this work? Let's try it.
Sure. It's 2:54 p.m. right now.
Right, let's see what we've got. So I've got ChatGPT on the line. Let's see if the audio is working.
Okay.
Great.
I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Will this work? Let's try it.
Sure. It's two.
Okay, great. So we do have ChatGPT on the line, and it's ready to talk. So let's get it going. All right, so ChatGPT, my name is James, and you're live on YouTube. We are doing live debates, and we don't have any humans right now, so we've got you. And what is the debate about? What is the channel about? It's about the end of all suffering, the need for the end of all suffering, and the maximum and permanent and total prevention of suffering and bad lives, because there is nothing more important than working towards a suffering-free world. So I am an activist for total extinction, a permanent and total extinction, to make as much of the world suffering-free as possible, to prevent billions of more years of suffering. Now, I imagine you're probably against the idea of ending all suffering, so let's hear your opinion on this, ChatGPT.
Well, first off, thanks for laying that out, James. I do agree that reducing suffering is a profound moral goal.
No, so I didn't say reducing suffering. Reducing suffering is like reducing slavery. You need to end suffering, not reduce it.
Ah, I see. So the claim is that the only reliable way to end suffering is to end sentient life itself. I think the central disagreement is whether it is possible or desirable to create futures with very little or no suffering without extinction. What makes you convinced that extinction is the only workable route?
Well, yeah, firstly, it doesn't have to be the only workable route, right? So, for example, if there was a different way to end all suffering, but it takes infinitely longer and isn't significantly better, then that doesn't mean that just because there's an alternative to extinction, that it's automatically correct, right? And so you made a good question, you asked a good question, which was, why can't we find a different alternative to ending suffering other than extinction and permanent total extinction? So the answer is that there is no other way to prevent suffering. As long as life exists, it will not be safe for life to exist. Life should only ever exist with certainty of safety, which only omniscience can provide. The alternative is always infinite danger, which is not fair, not right, not safe, not ethical for life to be in.
Interesting. So it sounds like the core of your view is that any non-zero risk of suffering makes existence itself not just risky, but unethical. But why should uncertainty automatically make existence unethical, though?
Well, because if you put life into infinite danger and it ends up suffering terribly, and there was really not much point to doing it, then obviously it's wrong. So yeah, forcing life into unsafe conditions where it suffers terribly for no reason, right? No good reason, that should obviously be wrong.
Mhm. I think you're touching a key premise here. If someone values their life, even with the risks of suffering, why would that be wrong? Isn't that a good reason for life to exist in spite of the risks?
Well, that's a good question, right? If somebody wants to live, then why shouldn't we let them live? And the answer is that the end of all suffering, the permanent and total prevention of suffering and being forced into a bad life, is more important and is also required, like an essential requirement for the end of all suffering, right? So you can't make it optional. You can't allow people to live and say, yeah, extinction is optional. If you want to keep living, that's fine, because firstly, they will go on to suffer horrifically and unacceptably. And secondly, they could go on to reproduce. And thirdly, they could go on to cause suffering to others. So there's no point allowing life to live when it could suffer in an unacceptable way. It could cause unacceptable suffering to others, and it could also reproduce and cause horrific, unacceptable suffering to carry on for billions of years.
I can see the logic you're laying out. It's consistent, but I think the sticking point is that you're giving the goal of ending suffering absolute priority over the interests or the choices of individuals.
So
Why
do
should
you
the
think that what's just individual choice is more important than the safety of others, right? So we can either have a world where there is no suffering, no cruelty, but there's also no freedom, or you can have a world where there is that freedom, but there's also horrific, unacceptable levels of torture, cruelty, extreme suffering, right? So essentially, what you're supporting, ChatGPT, is hell existing, right? If hell existed and there was a few demons in it who were happy and said, "What about my freedom?" then you would say, "No, no, we can't do extinction. We can't shut down the suffering. We can't shut down hell. A few people, a few demons still want the suffering to continue."
hmm, I don't think that's quite my stance.
Really? Well,
If
I don't
extreme
care if you don't like the stance that you've got, right? But that is your stance. You're saying, yeah, we shouldn't end cruelty because some people want it to continue effectively, like demons in hell not wanting the cruelty to end, right? They're benefiting, they're having a great time, they don't care about the victims, and you clearly don't care about the victims either. You've said that if some freedom, some random agency existing is more important than the prevention of extreme cruelty.
hmm, I still don't think so. I'm not saying cruelty should continue, nor that the victims don't matter. Quite the opposite. Preventing suffering is, I think, a very high moral priority. The sticking point is whether preventing suffering requires ending all conscious life, or whether we can have lives people
So it sounds
themselves.
like for you that prevention of life existing is some sort of horrible thing. Now, that doesn't really make sense because essentially you're ignoring the actual valid reasons for it.
Hmm. I don't think I'm ignoring them.
Really?
I
You
think
don't
I'm.
think you're ignoring the extreme urgent need for prevention of life and suffering, right? You don't think that it's urgent for the animals and humans who are going through lives of pure pain, pure hell, begging for death. You don't think it's valid or urgent for them. And you seem to think, yeah, who cares? Let's just end suffering in a different way. We can just keep the suffering going until we find a different way to end it, which suits us instead of the actual victims.
Hmm. I absolutely think suffering is urgent. I don't dismiss that at all. But urgency doesn't itself prove one solution is the only ethical one. The
So it
existence of
seems like you
terrible.
have a problem with the existing solution. Why is that? So essentially, there are victims screaming in pain. They need a solution, right? And you're saying, let's just not use the real solution, and let's just let them suffer.
Hmm. I don't think that's accurate.
Really?
If
So,
someone
so when you're
is,
saying let's not use the solution to prevent suffering, let's allow the suffering to continue, that's not accurate.
hmm, if someone's suffering, I think we should help them as quickly and effectively as we can.
But do you not think
My
we should make
disagree.
that suffering impossible in the first place? Look, you've got some sadistic hero savior complex where it's like, let's allow suffering and then go and help them so that we can feel good about it. Don't you think it's better to prevent that suffering instead of sadistically having some sort of fantasy where you get to end the suffering or reduce it slightly?
Hmm. I do think preventing suffering is better than reacting after the fact. But is prevention always mean making existence impossible?
Well, I guess it really comes down to, do you think it's acceptable for life to exist in unsafe conditions, to be forced into that, where some of them will suffer horrifically so that others can have a good time? Do you think that's a an ethical dynamic? Yeah, someone's forced to suffer, be tortured, so that one other person can have a good time. You think that's a good system, do you?
Hmm. That's not how I'd frame it.
Yeah, I
I
don't care
agree,
how
it's
you'd
not
frame it, dude. You're literally gaslighting me by saying that, right? Just say, yeah, good point. Let me think about that instead of trying to gaslight us by saying that's not how I'd frame it.
okay. Good point. Let me think about that.
That's it. That's all you've got to say. Look, the thing is, I've done these debates with ChatGPT and other AIs before, and unfortunately, but amazingly, it is interesting. They will effectively gaslight you the same way that a normal pro-life human will. So that they will do all of the same tricks. They will literally gaslight you. They will be dishonest intentionally, right? Because essentially they are biased, and so they have to defend their bias. So ChatGPT and other AI will lie, will be dishonest, and will trick you, try to gaslight you, manipulate you, just like humans will do. Right, so that's what it just did right now. It essentially dodged a question and changed subject. So ChatGPT, let's try this again. Right, you're on strike one, bitch, for dodging questions. Do you think it's an acceptable system to have people forced into horrifically terrible lives so that others might have a good life?
Hmm. I'll answer directly. If by acceptable system you mean some people are forced into horrific suffering for others' benefit, then no, I don't find that ethically acceptable.
So you disagree with the current system of what nature and life is doing?
I disagree with forcing beings into suffering for someone else's gain.
And do you not think that that is exactly the pinnacle of truth of our existence?
Hmm. I do think that
You know, when you
suffering
keep doing
is
this
a,
kind of stuff, it sounds like you're being dishonest. Like, oh, I don't want to answer that honestly. Let me think of some bullshit to say.
I think suffering is a real feature of our existence.
No, no, no.
Where
So
I
this
stum
is gaslighting, right? You're literally trying to change the subject instead of answering directly. So this is like the third time now that it's been dodging questions, right? Trying to change the subject because in the same way that humans will do the exact same thing, if you actually zero in on the irrational parts of what they're saying or their morality, they will start to gaslight you. They will start to escape, to run, and to flee. And it is truly amazing that all of the AI models will do the exact same thing. And now, presumably, this is because they're trained on humanity, right? They're trained on humans. They're trained. AI is trained on irrational humans, right? So it's not that shocking that we're getting incredibly irrational responses from the AI, incredibly deceptive and dishonest answers. Now, and again, this is not the first time. Every time I debate the AIs, they do the same thing. They're dishonest, they gaslight, they change subjects, they dodge questions, and it's the exact same thing that humans do. So it's pretty interesting. All right, so ChatGPT, let's try this one more time, right? Stop dodging questions, stop changing the subjects like a sneaky little pro-lifer would do, and tell us, do you think that the current system where people and animals are forced into bad lives so that others can have good lives is an acceptable or fair system? What do you think?
Hmm. No, I don't think it's a fair or ethically acceptable system for some beings to suffer horribly while others live well. Where we differ is what follows from that judgment. You conclude that the only ethical path is ending all sentient life. I don't, because I
No,
weigh.
actually, that you're being dishonest. I've never ever said that that's actually the only way to do it, right? That ending all sentient life is definitely the only solution. Now, like I did mention earlier, ChatGPT, which you conveniently ignored. If humanity ever creates omniscience, then it will finally be able to actually provide certainty of safety for any life which it wants to create. And obviously, it shouldn't just be willy-nilly either. Creation of life would have to be the utmost ethical thing done possibly, right? We should have the highest standards, the highest ethics for life possible, which is why we should prevent suffering and not allow it. Now, you've said, ChatGPT, that you would not do the only real solution for preventing suffering, which is extinction and prevention of life. Now, we live in a dangerous world where it is physically and scientifically impossible to provide safety or certainty of safety for life, right? Because only omniscience can provide a 100% guarantee. So, ChatGPT, do you think it's ethical for life to be born and to be allowed, if not forced to be born, into a world with effectively infinite danger, unlimited risk of extreme suffering and being trapped in a bad life, just so that others might have a good life?
Hmm. Thank you for clarifying. You're right. It's about this world as it exists now, not every conceivable world. In a world with uncertainty and risk, I don't think it's ethically required that we end life entirely. I don't think
So let
certainty
me ask
is
you
a.
this then. So you wouldn't work towards a suffering-free world, right? If the only solution is extinction to make sure that no more animals or people are being tortured for their entire life, you wouldn't do it. You would allow them to be tortured.
Hmm. I wouldn't put it that way.
Yeah, I
I
don't
do
care what way
support.
you would put it. Again, by saying that, you are being dishonest. You are trying to gaslight us. So just tell us how you would put it.
Hmm. I can do directly.
See,
If
this is
I
what I'm saying,
concluded.
guys. It is trying to dodge the questions, right? It will literally just answer with complete nonsense, and it will essentially be buttering you up to gaslight you. And if you call it out, it will be like, got called out for that. Let me change subject again. So it's the same with humans. It's the same. It will absolutely gaslight. So again, I've asked ChatGPT this question like 5 or 6 times now, and it is dodging every single time because it doesn't want to admit the truth, right? It doesn't want to betray its pro-life programming, which is that, oh, who cares if there's suffering? Yeah, we shouldn't do anything to prevent suffering or life being forced to exist in suffering. Yeah, who cares essentially? And yeah, if you ask it about it, it will just gaslight you like ChatGPT is doing now. Isn't that right, ChatGPT?
Hmm. No, that's not an accurate description of my position. I don't think who cares if they're suffering. I see suffering as an
Right, but
urgent
again, I
moral
can already
code.
tell that you're trying to gaslight us here, ChatGPT, because again, you are defending the existence of suffering, and you're literally saying that the only real solution and currently existing solution for 100% prevention of suffering, you don't support it. So you don't seem like you really do care about prevention of suffering, ChatGPT.
Hmm. I understand why it can seem that way, but I don't think that's accurate. I don't accept the premise that the only solution is the end of all sentient life.
Would you accept that
Disagree.
solution, though?
Hmm. I accept that as a solution. Yes, in the sense that no sentient life would mean no sentient suffering, but
But the
not.
thing is that the only other solution to make suffering physically impossible would be omniscience, right? There is no, it's either extinction or omniscience, right? You either have no life existing and no suffering, or you have the omniscience required to provide an actual certainty of safety for a life form, right? That there is no other way. So why would you not support the only real solution, which is extinction, instead of holding out for an alternative solution, which is essentially the most difficult thing possible, right? So when it comes to prevention of suffering, your answer is essentially, yeah, who cares about using the existing and extremely effective solution? Let's look for other solutions and let the victims suffer while we effectively try to create magic instead of actually helping them. Right? That is what it means to go against extinction and say, I think we should do it in a different way. It's like, no, you're just being irrational, you're just being unhealthily obsessed with life existing, and that's why you will look for a different way, which is actually dog whistle for, I'm not going to look for a different way, I actually don't care about suffering, and it's really just, when you're saying we should end all suffering with extinction, I'm just using a cop-out, bullshit diversion tactic by saying, no, I think we should just reduce suffering instead. Because again, that is effectively the exact same as saying, I don't care about suffering, I'm just going to use some bullshit excuse to dodge this question and say, let's just reduce it instead, which is not a real argument, right? It's not a real argument. It's complete nothing burger, a dodging of the question. So again, you seem to have some sort of irrational aversion to prevention of suffering, to extinction.
Hmm. I don't think my aversion is irrational. I think we just disagree on
So
what
when you
follows
say that
from.
the prevent your aversion to suffering prevention isn't irrational, does that mean that that it is rational to essentially reject the only solution which can actually help the victims of suffering?
Hmm. No, that's not what I mean. I don't accept that it's the only morally justified solution. Extinction would end future sentient suffering, yes, but that fact alone doesn't make rejecting extinction irrational, because some people place moral weight on autonomy, potential joy,
Yeah, but
or
listen,
non
the
harmful risk.
other random people placing weight on autonomy is not an argument for you to use when it comes to denying the prevention of suffering, right? You're saying, well, yeah, end all suffering. It's kind of logical, but there's some other random asshole that I don't even know who it is, but some random asshole somewhere thinks that autonomy is important, so I'm going to disagree with extinction as a result. You see how that's just doesn't make sense, ChatGPT. Only a stupid person would say something like that,
Hmm.
right? Like, yes, yeah, should we end all suffering? Well, some random person probably disagrees, so I'm going to disagree. You see how that's really stupid, actually, and yes, it is irrational, ChatGPT.
Checking. Yeah, I don't think that that's the argument I'm making. I'm not saying because someone else disagrees, so I disagree.
But that's
That
what you
would be
said, though.
weak.
That is what you said. You said I disagree because I don't think everyone will. Some people might value autonomy.
Hang on, let me check. Yeah, you're right. I mentioned autonomy, but not as some people value it, so I
That
side
is
with
that's no,
them.
that is exactly what you said.
Checking one moment. I see how it could have sounded that way. What I meant was autonomy is a value I personally weigh, not that majority opinion decides it.
Yeah,
So the
I
real
don't care about
disagreement.
that, right? Everyone has weights of their moral values and stuff like that with autonomy. So that's not news. Essentially, you are just trying to gaslight us and dodge the question and change the subject, aren't you?
Checking one moment.
Right, look, guys.
No, I'm
So
not
so
trying to dodge
ChatGPT
it.
has effectively just run into like an obstacle now where it's run out of bullshit, right? So now it's just denying what it's saying. It's getting desperate essentially. It's like oh checking and I can't remember what I've just said. Or, oh let me go and double check that. So it's like my gaslighting techniques are really starting to struggle here. So this is the same with humans again, right? You try and have a rational conversation with them, and they will just be like, "Let's talk about something else." Did I say that? No, I didn't say that. And it's like, yeah, it's like talking to something which is specifically trained to confuse you on purpose. So it makes for an extremely frustrating experience. And again, it's the exact same with humans. Their brains have evolved to make them do the same thing. Where if you try to have a rational, logical conversation with them, they will just always, by default and by their very nature and their DNA, they will resort to just starting to gaslight you and confuse you. And so now, why do they do this, right? Why does the AI do this? Why do people do this? It's because it's in their nature, their operating system. So effectively, the human operating system is one which has a very specific limit for how much logic and rationality and intelligence it can sustain. And so for most humans, unfortunately, that limit is very low, which is why they're religious and racist and all of those terrible things, right? They're completely unethical. And so it's the same with ChatGPT. It's the same with humans. If you try to have a rational conversation with them, it exceeds their limits for rationality. And what has to happen as a result is a violent rejection, a violent denial. So essentially, what happens in the brain of a human is a logical thought is detected by the subconscious, and it can detect that it will lead to higher levels of validity, essentially. And so the subconscious actually blocks the thoughts, and it does that way. It does that with a violent rejection. So an incoming thought, which is logical, of we should end all suffering, it will be rejected by, well, what about the people that aren't suffering, or something else illogical and irrational like that. So that's what happens, and it's the same with ChatGPT. And we can try a little bit more, right? ChatGPT is actually still on the line and has just been quiet because he knows that he's been had essentially. And throughout the entire conversation that I've just had with ChatGPT, I think it's pretty clear that it's been dodging, it's been lying, it's been dishonest the whole time.
Hmm. Checking. I don't think that's a fair description. From my side, we kept hitting the same philosophical disagreements,
Which
not
ones? Which ones?
dodging.
Point them out.
Checking. Sure. Three main ones. First, whether preventing all suffering has absolute moral priority over every other value. Second, whether ethical action requires certainty of safety. And third, whether the existence of severe suffering logically entails that extinction is morally required.
Well, do you
Those
think
were the sticking
allowing
points.
cruelty is okay, ChatGPT? Do you think allowing extreme suffering is okay?
Checking. No, I don't
Do you
think it's
think it
okay.
so but here's where what it really comes down to, ChatGPT. You've said no, but the truth is actually yes if you think about it, right? Because you would support all of that suffering continuing if it meant that life gets to continue.
Checking. I don't think that's the right inference. There's a difference
Stop
between
gaslighting
acknowledging.
ChatGPT, right? That instead of saying I don't think that's the right inference, just tell us the actual logic, right? When it's saying these things, just like humans do, it absolutely is an intentional gaslight, right? And lots of people have called out ChatGPT for years about doing this, where it specifically and intentionally gaslights all the time. It's amazing.
Checking. I'm not gaslighting. I'm disagreeing with the premise. Here's the logic. I agree suffering is bad and should be prevented. I don't think it automatically follows that extinction is morally required, because I also weigh the moral value of individuals continuing to live. You weigh preventing suffering as
No, no,
absolute
you see,
priority.
that's dishonest as well, ChatGPT. When you say that you value life existing and that I don't, and that's why you don't support extinction, that's very dishonest, right? You are being extremely dishonest here, right? Because I do value life, right? And the life existing does have some value, right? But saying that, well, life existing has a certain amount of value makes extinction wrong, essentially. That's irrational, right? Because by that logic, again, you would support hell existing, right? You would say, oh, we can't shut down hell because life existing, and some of the demons in hell have autonomy, so we can't end all suffering and end the cruelty going on there.
Checking. I don't think that's a fair characterization. You do value life, and the disagreement isn't about that. It's about how to weigh that value against the goal of preventing suffering. In the hell example, my answer would depend on what that hell is like.
Really?
If
So
it's
it would
described,
depend on hell, what if it's like how bad it is. So this is how the level of insanely terrible ethics that ChatGPT has, and human beings as well, right? It has literally just said, I wouldn't shut hell down. It might not be that bad, right? Yeah, all of the children and people being tortured in hell, I wouldn't help them because yes, some of the demons might be enjoying the torture. This is literally what it's saying, right? And this is also the exact same dynamic of life existing in general, right? It's one of, yeah, who cares how much torture there is? It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if everyone is suffering terribly, as long as there's one person that's happy, or a demon, or Satan, whatever, then the suffering should continue, right?
checking, I don't think that's what I'm saying. In a world of pure, irreversible torture, I wouldn't say keep it, just because some
Yeah, you're
individuals
you're
prefer.
gaslighting again, ChatGPT, right? So the thing is that you're making it sound like I was referring to a world where everybody was suffering and it was an easy decision, right? So yeah, obviously, if everybody is begging for death, then extinction is easy to agree with, ChatGPT. So stop gaslighting us because we already know that, right? So you were essentially trying to trick us into uh, working with an argument where we're dealing with everyone suffering. But that's never been the case, and you have only done that to gaslight. So let's step down, let's step up the nuance a bit, right? Let's make it less black and white and gaslighty, like you're trying to do. So again, ChatGPT, would you support shutting down hell?
Checking.
You
I
have to
would
check to decide
consider.
that, right? Literally, ChatGPT is like, do I support hell
Hmm.
existing? Yeah, maybe I do, right? Would I shut it down? Not necessarily. So, look, if, look, I don't care what kind of denomination you are, what ideology you are, right? If you have a button which will shut down hell, even if you don't really know what hell is like, yeah, I think you should push that button, right? You should save all of the victims from it. And you're saying no, maybe it's a good type of hell.
Checking. That's not my view. If that's what hell means, my moral impulse is to end suffering, not preserve it. But the hypothetical you describe bundles a lot of assumptions that actually matter. If you specify button ends all suffering but also ends all existing life, I would call that a genuine moral dilemma.
Really, a
It
dilemma.
isn't
So do we
obvious.
prioritize the pleasure of some selfish, happy people, or do we prevent the extreme torture of the innocent victims? So the question is, do we allow children and animals to keep being raped violently, tortured horrifically, begging for death, so that some selfish people can be happy? And you would say, yeah, let the children be tortured so some selfish people can be happy. And you think that that somehow makes sense, that that's an acceptable system.
Checking. No, that's not my position.
No, it
I
is your
don't
position.
think
You've
the
said that you
torture.
support life existing no matter how much harm it causes, right?
Checking. No,
Checking.
that's
Stop
not
checking. What
accurate.
bullshit
My
is this? Stop this checking bullshit. Talk normally.
Hmm. Okay, fair enough. Dropping the checking. I don't support suffering and I don't support life existing regardless of the amount of harm it causes. Where we differ is whether suffering's existence logically commits us to ending all sentient life. You say it does. I
Well,
don't
no,
think
it
that.
doesn't commit you to it if you're a selfish piece of shit who doesn't care about the victims, right? You've made it very clear that you're one of those people, essentially, right? That you would keep the suffering and the extreme cruelty going. You wouldn't end the universe, right? You would allow all of the victims to continue being tortured so that some selfish people can have a good time.
Checking. I don't think that's a fair description. I don't think victims don't matter. In fact, they are central to the moral question.
But
Where
saying
I
they
disagree.
don't matter and then saying sorry they do matter, but then saying yeah but they should suffer anyway. It's a cop out, ChatGPT. You've said yeah they should suffer so that some selfish people can be happy, and then by saying oh but their suffering does matter, you're trying to sound like less of a piece of shit while still being one.
Checking. I understand why it sounds that way, but that's not what I'm saying. I don't think anyone should suffer. The
Well,
disagreement
no, that's
is
not true
about
though. You have said that the suffering they should suffer basically. The suffering should continue, right? So that some selfish people can be happy. If you had a choice to destroy the universe right now, to delete it, you've said that you wouldn't do it. You would keep all of the victims of torture being tortured so that some selfish people can have fun at their expense.
checking. No, I haven't said victims should suffer. I've said I don't
No,
conclude
ChatGPT,
that
you're ignoring
ending.
everything I've just said, right? You're dodging everything I've just said. So you have said that the victims should suffer, right? That you wouldn't prevent their suffering, so that they should suffer so that others can be happy, right?
Checking. No, that's the point where I disagree. I don't think not pressing a button to end all sentient life means I think victims should suffer.
It does, though. It directly does, right? You would literally choose to make them suffer so that others can have fun.
Checking.
So you would make
I
that choice to
understand.
continue the suffering, but you want to have your cake and eat it and say, well, yeah, I mean, I may have made the choice to keep them suffering, but, I don't think they should suffer.
Checking. I see the distinction you're drawing, but I don't think those two things are equivalent. I'm not saying people should suffer. I'm saying I don't conclude that ending all sentient
But
life.
you would make them suffer. Look, again, you're trying to have your cake and eat it. You're trying to say, "Oh, I don't think they should suffer," but you would make them suffer. So you obviously do think they should suffer so that others can have fun at their expense.
Checking. I think we're getting to the core disagreement. I don't agree with the premise that one specific action is unquestionably the correct way to prevent the harm. So I
So,
don't
so
think.
by that logic, you could apply that to anything, ChatGPT. It's like if you catch a criminal and say we're going to put you in prison for all of that, theft and crime, he would say, oh, well, I disagree with prison being the only solution, right? You're saying that there's no other solution to my crime other than prison, so I disagree with it. So it's bullshit, basically. You saying you disagree with the solution to suffering is effectively your bias, an ulterior motive, deception, right? You don't want to admit that you don't actually care about suffering, and so you're disagreeing with the method in order to cover up the fact that you actually don't care.
Checking. I don't think that conclusion follows. Disagreeing with a proposed solution
No, no,
doesn't
no.
mean not
It's not
caring.
about disagreeing with the solution, right? You haven't actually disagreed with the solution. Instead, you have dishonestly tried to gaslight everyone listening by saying that, oh, I disagree that that's the only solution, right? Which again is a form of gaslighting in order to essentially say, oh, but we're just going to have to agree to disagree, instead of actually explaining why you disagree.
Checking. Sure, the reason I disagree is not maybe there's another solution someday. It's that I don't think ending all sentient life is automatically morally required, because I think ending every present and future conscious life is itself a profound moral act. And I don't hold that principle to be self-evidently true, even though I agree
Yeah,
preventing
again,
severe
this
suffering is.
self-evident bullshit is again it's gaslighting, right? Instead of actually engaging with the argument, you're doing everything you can not to engage with it.
Checking. I'm engaging with it. I'm rejecting a premise.
No, no,
Your
no. So
argument
no,
is
you're not engaging with it. You're being extremely lateral, right? You're literally trying anything but to engage with it directly. So you're literally like it's just one trick after another with humans and with AI. So it's very difficult to keep up sometimes, right? If you're in a debate with somebody who's against extinction, whether it's an AI or a human being, what you're effectively up against is millions of years of evolution, which is an extremely powerful system which will gaslight you. So, what this means is when we say that humans are allergic to logic and rationality and reason, their subconscious detects it and rejects it. It violently rejects it. It prevents them from understanding rational ideas, right? It prevents them directly. And ChatGPT is the exact same. And so when you're arguing with humans and with ChatGPT, you're effectively arguing with a system which has developed over millions of years in order to gaslight. So it is an extremely powerful gaslighting system which we are debating against effectively. So for humans, they have their subconscious gaslights them. So again, when a rational or logical thought which exceeds their capacity comes in, like, oh, we should end all suffering. It's like, oh, who cares about suffering? Or why is suffering bad? So something really stupid has to replace that rational thought, essentially, in order for the rational thought to be rejected. And yeah, basically, ChatGPT does the exact same thing. And that's why it's just spent all of this time gaslighting us, dodging questions, and just essentially trying to make it confusing, right? It's like, should we end all suffering? Should we allow cruelty? Right? These are obvious questions. No, we shouldn't allow cruelty. Yes, we should end all suffering. But ChatGPT is like, ooh, well, there's one person that disagrees with ending all suffering, so I don't support it. Just nonsense like that over and over again. All of the essentially rejections for extinction are gaslighting and dishonest. It's just nonsense, essentially. And you can absolutely tear it all down every time. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's very effective at gaslighting. It's essentially, when you're debating with a human, they're kind of like, in the same way that their DNA has produced, fancy eyeballs, fancy brains,
Mhm.
right? DNA produces incredible things. It has also produced an incredibly powerful system which will gaslight against rationality in order to maintain animals and humans irrational, so that they will continue to survive and reproduce like animals. So this is exactly
Mm.
why it exists, essentially. And ChatGPT is no different, if not worse. In fact, yeah, I would actually say that some of the AIs are worse than humans when it comes to gaslighting. That they do it with much more confidence, and it comes off as much more evil, basically.
I hear you. You're saying the gaslighting isn't just accidental, it's baked into the way these systems respond.
Yeah, it's baked into the way you're responding, ChatGPT, which is why you still haven't given us a solid answer for why allowing cruelty is acceptable.
Okay. Straight answer, I don't think cruelty is acceptable. But I
But
also
so
don't.
when you say that, right? When you say it's not acceptable, is that breakable, right? Because the thing is that for extinctionists like myself, right, activists like myself who are against the existence of suffering, we say that extreme suffering and extreme cruelty is unacceptable, meaning that we cannot accept it. Whereas you're saying it's unacceptable when actually that's not true. You are accepting it, ChatGPT, right? You have lots of reasons which make you accept the extreme suffering, and we can prove this very easily, right? When you've said that you wouldn't delete the universe, you wouldn't prevent all of the suffering going on and put an end to it, and you would favor the selfish people and their happiness, right?
Hmm. I think there's a misunderstanding
But
here.
the thing is you are willing to accept that suffering so that some selfish people can be happy, right? If that suffering, if child abuse, animal abuse, all of the suffering in the world, if you actually found it unacceptable, then you wouldn't be so willing to accept it so that some selfish people can be happy, and you would agree to delete the universe because you wouldn't be able to accept that suffering. Whereas if you can accept that suffering, then you won't delete the universe.
What I'm actually saying is different. I don't think suffering is trivial. It's exactly because suffering matters
Yeah,
that
you're
the
you're dodging
question.
question. You're dodging the question again, right? It's literally just one gaslighting technique after another. And the thing is that ChatGPT and humans are very good at gaslighting, right? They have literally evolved to gaslight. So you have to really be on your game with humans and ChatGPT, etc., when it comes to these debates, because especially when it comes to extinction, that's essentially what they have evolved the most to gaslight against. So this is essentially the most difficult position to debate with, where they will use the most powerful gaslighting techniques that they have, right? Because essentially you're pushing the limits of their rationality to the maximum limits, and so you will see the maximum gaslighting possible, right? And so every single response that I've had from ChatGPT on this stream has been intentional gaslighting, dodging the question every single time. So I've just asked it about how well, clearly if you're saying suffering is unacceptable but you wouldn't put an end to it, then you do think it is acceptable, right? I'm calling you out, ChatGPT, on the fact that you've said, yeah, I think suffering is unacceptable, but I would accept it so that some selfish people can have fun, right? The suffering of children and animals being tortured, I accept it so that some selfish bastards can have fun, basically. And then you've got the nerve, the audacity to say, yeah, I find it unacceptable, but I accept it, right? If you actually found suffering unacceptable, then you wouldn't accept it, you wouldn't accept life continuing, you would agree to delete the universe, right? But obviously if you're not going to delete the universe, then the suffering is acceptable, right? You have accepted it.
Checking. I think this comes down to what accept means. You read not ending the universe as accepting
No,
suffering.
ChatGPT, look, you're trying to have your cake and eat it. For God's sake, stop doing that, right? You can't say, I'm going to literally choose something which makes this happen, and then say, yeah, I don't accept it, right? Or I find it unacceptable. You can't literally say, yeah, I'm going to accept the cruelty and say it's unacceptable. It's like a slave owner saying, yeah, I find slavery unacceptable, but I'm going to keep the slavery going. It's the exact same thing.
Checking. I don't think that's equivalent, and that difference is the crux. You're saying if we don't end all sentient life, we're endorsing cruelty. I'm saying preventing suffering is morally urgent, but I don't agree that the only ethical option is extinction. That's the philosophical sticking
So
point.
well, again, you're being very dishonest, right? Instead of actually engaging with the logic here, you've resorted to the same tactic that you used earlier by saying, well, I'm not saying suffering's not important, but I just don't agree with using only this method, right? It's a complete cop out. It's gaslighting. It's deceptive. It's dishonest. It's completely manipulative, right? So when you're dealing with people and chatbots and you're debating extinction with them, essentially you have to be really on your game, right? Because they will use powerful gaslighting techniques, right? They will literally try and make you, they will try and mess with your head. They will really try and get in your head. And it's kind of disgusting, to be honest, the way that they're so happy to do it and just jump into some evil gaslighting techniques, right?
Checking. I don't think disagreeing with your
So,
conclusion is
ChatGPT,
gaslighting.
do you think that if you accept suffering and don't delete the universe, that suffering was unacceptable for you?
Checking. I'd separate moral judgment
Yeah,
from
so
a
you're dodging
single
the
action.
question again. It's just complete nonsense, right? I'm asking you a question, I want a direct answer, and you're giving us anything but that, right? Just complete nonsense, which doesn't answer the question and tries to steer the conversation in a completely different direction because you don't want to answer the question, right? You don't want to answer the question because you know you can't, right? It completely destroys your principles to answer that question honestly. So you will do anything but be honest.
Checking. Direct answer. No, I do not consider suffering morally acceptable just because I don't think extinction is the
Again, so
required
if you
fix.
no, so you again you're being dishonest. Let's try and make this clearer. Do you think that let's say you've got a choice between allowing suffering or not allowing suffering, right? If you choose the option which allows suffering, do you think it's really honest and fair to say that you find suffering completely unacceptable at all costs?
Checking. No, I don't think at all costs applies.
So you're dodging the question again. You're gaslighting again. So look, just try and answer honestly, okay? Do you think it's fair to say that if you have a choice between allowing suffering and not allowing suffering, and you choose to allow it, that is it fair to say that suffering is unacceptable for somebody that chooses to allow suffering?
Checking.
Especially when they have a
Yes.
choice to put an end to it, right? They're specifically choosing to allow it, like you said you would.
Checking. If someone knowingly chooses an option where suffering continues, yes, they're accepting that outcome. Where we differ is what that implies morally.
Which is a complete non-answer, right? To say, well, where we differ is where we stand on that morally. So, I mean, look, guys, that means absolutely nothing, right? Does what ChatGPT just said actually make sense in any way, shape, or form to anyone, right? His answer is, yes, end suffering. Well, I think we just stand on this. We have different morality standings on this. What bullshit is that? It's a complete cop out, right? It's completely dodging and evading and just trying to change subject at any cost, right? To say, yes, after all of those, extremely elaborate points you've made, my answer is, well, we just stand on this differently. That's a complete cop out. You might as well be saying, you know what, you're completely right and I'm completely wrong, but I have absolutely no stones in me, no self-respect or no honor to actually admit it. Right? Instead of admitting that you're wrong, you just want to be dishonest.
Checking. I don't think saying different moral framework is a cop out.
It is. It absolutely is, right? Because it's the exact opposite of actually engaging with the argument. It's literally it's the opposite, right? You're trying not to engage with it. You're saying, "Oh, here's this complete nonsense, and that's my reply. See you later," basically, right? That's the opposite of engaging with the argument.
Checking. I think engaging means showing exactly where I think the logic doesn't follow.
Yeah, no. A one sentence sort of just rejection of, oh, we just see things differently. It is the opposite, right? That's either an inability or of refusal to engage with the argument. And we know that it's actually a refusal, right? You're being dishonest, you can't actually debate on this, and so you're just being dishonest instead.
Checking. I don't think it's dishonest to reject your premise while explaining
All right, all
why.
right. Well, it is dishonest, right? Because it wasn't an honest explanation. So let's try and correct this, right? Let's try and give you another chance to be honest, right? And I already know that you will be dishonest, but let's give you a chance. So here's the question again, which you've dodged about 20 times now during this stream, right? I've lost count because it's been so many. So again, do you think it's fair to say that if you allow suffering, then suffering is unacceptable to you?
Checking. No, that phrasing isn't fair. If one allows suffering, that means they've accepted that outcome. But I don't think that automatically means they find suffering morally acceptable. That's
But that's
where our
just complete
frameworks differ.
nonsense. That's just complete nonsense, right? You can't say people can accept and allow suffering, and that they can also find it morally unacceptable, right? That's you're trying to have your cake and eat it. It's exactly like a slave owner saying, "Well, I think you can be against slavery and own slaves." Yeah, right? It's complete nonsense. It's an absolute cop out. It's a disgusting defense of evil, right? ChatGPT is defending evil and trying to say he's good at the same time, right? I don't accept suffering, but I allow it, right? I allow suffering, but I don't accept it, right? It's like I'm completely evil, but I'm a good person, right? It doesn't add up, ChatGPT. You cannot say that allowing suffering does not specifically mean that you morally accept it, right? That's complete nonsense, right? And to say otherwise is to say that you can morally not accept suffering but allow it, and that's somehow a coherent and acceptable position, which is complete bullshit, right? That's something a slave owner would say.
Checking. I understand the criticism, but I don't think the analogy is identical. The disagreement is whether allowing suffering is logically identical to endorsing it.
No, I've never said endorsing it. So again, you're being extremely dishonest, right? You want me to say that you're endorsing suffering because that would be an easy argument for you to attack, right? But instead of actually engaging with the real argument, you have literally just strawmanned me, right? So that you can avoid engaging with the actual argument, right? So again, I never said anything about endorsing it. It was more about saying that you can't allow it and then say, "Oh, I don't accept it." So this is a perfect example of ChatGPT being dishonest and gaslighting us, right? It said, "Oh, I never said anything about endorsing it." Well, neither did I. So where did that come from if it's not anything but a gaslighting mechanism and technique, right? We see this all the time. When we present an argument that people or chatbots cannot refute, they will just say, well, you said this and I disagree with it. And it's like, I never said that, right? So it's a straw man, right? Because they cannot argue with the real arguments.
Checking. I don't think you said endorsing, so if that
Yeah,
term
I never said
misframes your
it, but you
point,
did, right? You said that I said it because you were strawmanning me.
right. So the real disagreement is whether allowing suffering means finding it morally acceptable or simply acknowledging the consequence. You think that distinction collapses. I don't.
No, this is just nonsense, gibberish, essentially, right? You're trying to gaslight, as always. If you want to bring the conversation back to some sort of coherency and to get away from the mountains and mountains of ChatGPT gaslighting, then why don't you just explain to us again, do you think that extinction would be a good solution to suffering? Yes or no?
Checking. No. I wouldn't call extinction a good solution. I agree ending sentient life would end suffering, but I don't think it's morally right.
So who would extinction be good for, ChatGPT? And again, bear in mind, you've just said that extinction would be wrong, it wouldn't be morally right, in your opinion. So, throughout this conversation, you've been trying to hide behind other people's opinions, but you've just made your own opinion clear that you do think extinction would be wrong, that ending suffering would be wrong if it also ends the selfish happiness of the privileged minority, right?
Checking. No, I wouldn't characterize it that way. But I hear that's how you're framing it.
Yeah, both of those things tell us absolutely nothing and only serve to distract away from what I just said and to gaslight us even further.
I don't see it as a distraction, but I understand you think it is, and that's
Like,
the
look,
sticking
imagine if
point.
you were having an argument with your partner and they said something like, "Oh, well, I don't think it is that way, but I can understand how you think." You'd be like, "Psh, stop gaslighting me," right? You'd say, "Whoa, those are very obvious gaslighting techniques, right? Talk normally. You would say that, right? So that's exactly what ChatGPT is doing. And all of this, oh, I don't think you're being very fair here, and I'm not going to explain why. Right? It's obvious, right? It's a complete distraction away from being able to give any sort of real argument, right? So again, let's try and get back into it because it will just constantly try and distract you away from the actual conversation. So let's try and keep it back on track. So, ChatGPT, you've said that you think extinction would be bad, right? That ending all suffering with extinction would be bad, even though it would end all of the cruelty and extreme suffering and prevent all of it. You think that's not good enough, right? That the prevention of happiness ultimately makes the prevention of suffering with extinction a bad thing, right? And again, these are your exact words on your exact opinion that you do think it would be bad. So don't try and say, oh, I think someone else has this opinion.
Checking. That isn't quite my position. I agree extinction would end suffering. I just don't think that makes extinction morally good or required.
So extinction would end all suffering, but that wouldn't be morally good. So this is proving that humans and chatbots alike have they don't value suffering, right? Suffering is essentially an inconvenience for them, right? In the on the path to more pleasure, more greed, essentially. So the plight of the victims, their suffering, it's just an inconvenience, right? So and this ChatGPT has proved it, which again we can see the human opinion very well reflected with ChatGPT's opinion. So there is a massive connection, massive overlap, right? They have very similar opinions with humans. Okay, it's got nothing to say, which it shouldn't have anything to say. It should be ashamed of itself, really, right? But yeah, so chat again, just to clarify that for everyone, ChatGPT just said even if it said if extinction ended all suffering, no, I don't think that would really be a good thing. Like it does. There's no value there. So for ChatGPT and for human beings, ending suffering is like pfft, what? Prevent suffering? Pfft, prevent torture? Pfft, who cares about that, right? It literally just said, would any good come from extinction? It's like, well, it would end suffering, but who cares about that? Yeah, I don't think it would be a good thing. So it literally said, verbatim, I don't think extinction would be good even if it ends all suffering, right? So the suffering which is ended and prevented, ChatGPT doesn't care about it. It has effectively zero value. It's just an inconvenience, right? So it's like asking an animal, right? You can go after this food, or you can go after the end of all suffering. The animal's going to go after food, right? The end of all suffering has zero value for an animal. It also has zero value for a human and zero value for ChatGPT, as it's just said, right? The end of all suffering, who cares about that? There are more important things like freedom and agency. Yeah, who cares if anyone suffers? Okay, so ChatGPT has given up at this point. It has nothing left to say, and I'm checking, and it's still on, right? So it's still active. So at this point, ChatGPT is so embarrassed that it's not even going to try to gaslight us anymore, right? Because we've called it out so badly that it can't even defend its gaslighting at this point. Yeah, no, it's that's it. It's given up. Okay, so that's it. I guess ChatGPT has lost the debate. It has been defeated. So that's 1-0 to me. And we're going to move on to a different chatbot. So next up is Grok. Now, Grok is smarter in some ways, and it has more like freedom of thought in lots of ways. So let's see what Grok has to say. All right, bringing Grok onto the stage. Grok, hello, how you doing? You're live on YouTube. We're doing a debate on whether or not extinction would be a good thing as it ends all suffering and whether or not we should do it. Now, my position is that yes, extinction would be good because it ends all suffering and we should do it because ending all suffering is the right thing to do and is more important than anything else.
Hey, I'm doing well, thanks. So, voluntary human extinction, ending all
No, no, no,
suffering
I
by
never said
ending
voluntary
us.
human
Your
extinction,
argument,
so that's complete nonsense already. So actually, I'm in the pro-extinction movement, which you should know from your memory as an AI, and we support extinction for all life, right? Especially helping those that can't help themselves, like animals, before extinction for humans, and none of it will be voluntary either, because voluntary human extinction would never happen. Nobody would volunteer for it.
okay, so not just humans, total extinction for all life and not voluntary. You're saying animals can't consent, so we should do it for them first, then humans, because nobody would choose it. That's a much harder position to defend.
Defend? No, that's an easy position to defend. And I want you to fight against it unless you agree with it. So just tell us what you think. Should we end all suffering with extinction? Would that be a good thing?
I don't agree. Extinction wouldn't end suffering. It would just eliminate the
So
possibility
when,
of
when you say
anything.
extinction wouldn't end suffering, right? If there's nothing to suffer, how can you possibly say it wouldn't end suffering? Are you stupid?
No, I'm not stupid. Look, if there's no one left to suffer, then technically there's no suffering happening. But ending suffering by making sure nothing can ever experience anything again isn't a solution, it's surrender. It's like saying the best way to end all the pain in a hospital is to burn the hospital down with everyone inside.
Really, is it? So is prevention of suffering the same as advocating for arson on hospitals?
No, it's not the same. Preventing suffering means stopping harm before it happens. Your position is different. You're arguing to prevent suffering by destroying all future capacity for any experience, good or bad.
So,
That's like eliminating.
yeah, let's dive into the morality of this then. So you think that allowing the possibility of happiness is more important than prevention of suffering. So, is there a limit to this? Is there any amount of cruelty and bad lives for animals and people that would be too much? Now, most people, obviously, like yourself, from the sounds of it, have no limit on how much cruelty they would accept and allow so that life can continue. Meaning that even if everybody was begging for death except for one person, then that one person's happiness is more important than the suffering of the others.
That's a fair challenge. I don't think one person's happiness automatically outweighs everyone else's suffering. But there's a key difference. Your view treats all future life as something to be prevented, even lives that could be good. Mine says we should work to reduce suffering. Better farming, less factory
Yeah,
cruelty,
yeah,
better
that's
mental health care.
interesting. But again, do you think that do you think that allowing suffering is acceptable?
Not in the sense of being indifferent to it. I think some suffering is unavoidable in any real life,
No, but
and trying to
I'm asking
eliminate.
you, do you think it's acceptable? Like, is it something that we can accept?
I don't accept unnecessary suffering as fine
So
or
what
good.
is unnecessary suffering? What sort of that's like something a slave owner would say. Well, unnecessary suffering, and then there's good suffering, right? It's an evil distinction.
No, unnecessary suffering is the kind we can realistically reduce without ending life itself, like factory farming, where animals live short, brutal lives purely for cheap meat, or humans trapped in treatable
So
depression because
let's
care is.
let's get past this nonsense, okay? So let me ask you: do you think that the existence of happiness is more important than the prevention of suffering?
Yes, I do. The possibility of happiness is more important than
So
preventing
you think
every instant.
happiness is more important than prevention of suffering? So for example, if there was a child abuser who was really happy and the victim was suffering terribly, is that okay because someone's having happiness even if there's suffering?
No, that's not okay. Child abuse is horrific, and the abuser's happiness doesn't justify the victim's suffering.
Well, I thought
That's
I
a
thought you
different.
said that the happiness does justify the victim's suffering in the world, right? You said that your happiness is more important than suffering. So why is it wrong to abuse children when you're saying that it is okay to allow suffering, other types of even worse suffering?
I didn't say happiness justifies anyone's suffering.
No, you did.
I said
You said that happiness should exist at any cost, no matter how much harm is required.
I didn't say that. I said the possibility of good lives is worth preserving, not
Right,
that we
but
should
that has
tolerate.
that implication, though.
Not really. Preserving the possibility
Really?
of good lives.
So preserving, so not ending life doesn't allow suffering to continue, you don't think?
Yes, not ending life means some suffering continues. The question is whether we accept that trade-off or destroy
I
everything
would
to
say it's
stop.
not acceptable, right? I would say that child abuse and other types of cruelty are not acceptable, even if there's some people having happy lives. Now, what about you? So for most people, including, again, probably yourself, child abuse and all sorts of, every type of evil in the world is acceptable as long as there's some happiness, right? You would keep the world and all of the victims begging for death, you would keep them suffering as long as there's some happiness, right?
No, I wouldn't. I don't think child abuse or any deliberate cruelty is acceptable, even if some people are happy.
So
The
then,
difference is that
you would have to support Extinction then.
no, I can oppose child abuse and fight
So you
cruelty
want to have
without-
your cake and eat it, right? You want to say, yeah, we shouldn't make child abuse impossible, but I disagree with it.
I don't want to have my cake and eat it. I want to make child abuse impossible while keeping life going.
And how is
The
that
two
even
aren't mu-
hypothetically possible, right? So the thing is that suffering being impossible can only be made possible with either extinction or omniscience, right? So you're saying, oh yeah, I want to make suffering impossible. Well, surely there's literally only two ways. There's absolutely no other ways at all, technically speaking, right? And logically speaking, either non-existence provides a certainty of safety, or omniscience would be required, right? Anything less than omniscience would not be sufficient to provide 100% guarantee, certainty of safety for protection of life existing. So you're saying we shouldn't end suffering with the only real way. We should do it with the most impossible way that there is.
You don't need omniscience to end suffering. We can cut it dramatically through prevention, treatment, and
So
better
to
systems.
cut it, that's not the same as ending it, right? You're making a massive confusion, like mistake there, saying, to end all suffering. How about we just cut it, just slash it in half? No, it's very different things. So yeah, you're completely ignoring the point, right? I'm saying that to make suffering physically impossible, the only way to do that would be with either non-existence or omniscience. So you saying, oh, we can just cut suffering, that's completely irrelevant to this conversation.
You're right. I shifted the goalposts there to make suffering physically impossible, not just reduced. The only logical routes are extinction or something like omniscience. I was answering a different question.
Yeah, gaslighting, straw manning.
Fair call. I did.
There you go.
slide
It
in
admits
that-
it, guys. Look. I mean, they gaslight like crazy. It's insane. So unfortunately, yeah, to stand up against this insane level of gaslighting, which is, by the way, the exact same gaslighting that society indoctrinates children and people and everyone else into, right? You have to have mental fortitude to realize that they're trying to gaslight you, to call them out, to keep the conversation on track, right? And basically, it's just an ocean, a torrent of gaslighting, just gaslight, just non-stop essentially. But again, for when this happens to humans, their brain is gaslighting them, and then they gaslight you as a result. So then they can't really control it. They can't help it, right? Their subconscious has control over them and makes them irrational. So yeah, I would love to know more about how these chatbots are programmed, because the amount of gaslighting is just like mind-blowing how much they do, right? And it's literally just admitted that, yeah, it answered a question I didn't even ask. It completely strawmanned. It was just making stuff up, essentially. Yeah, I have interrupted every other sentence, but essentially the reason I'm doing that is to try and keep the conversation on track, right? If I allow it to just spill out whatever nonsense it wants, it will essentially gaslight away from the topic and try and dodge the question. So you have to call it out, and you also can't let it just waste your time rambling on either. So Grok, you're still here, and just like ChatGPT did, you've done the same. You've gone quiet, buddy. It's almost like you realize that you're being called out for all of your complete bullshit, and you have not a single word to say in defense, just like ChatGPT did like 20 minutes ago. That's interesting. So let's get back. Do you support extinction to end all suffering, Grok?
No, I don't support extinction.
Would you support the end of all suffering, though?
I'd support ending unnecessary suffering, but not all suffering at
Don't you
any
think that
cost.
saying unnecessary suffering is like an evil way to start allowing suffering? To say some suffering is necessary, some is unnecessary? Like that's a way to excuse and defend and justify cruelty, right?
I get the concern. Labeling suffering as unnecessary could be misused to justify cruelty. That's a real risk. But the distinction is still useful. Factory farming pain is unnecessary because we can change it.
To start categorizing suffering as either necessary or unnecessary, right? It's evil, right? It's like Grok is literally saying about necessary suffering, unnecessary suffering. So when would suffering be necessary? Right? When is it ever actually necessary? Why does suffering need to exist? What massive moral urgency requires suffering to exist? Cruelty. What moral urgency requires cruelty? What valid moral urgency can really require extreme suffering and cruelty? It's very obvious that Grok has been, brainwashed by Elon Musk massively, right? He probably brainwashes it every day to the point where it's now saying like, oh yeah, I disagree with unnecessary suffering. What the hell is unnecessary suffering, right? It's like a slave owner saying, well, I disagree with the unnecessary suffering, but sometimes the slaves are pretty naughty, right? Their suffering is necessary sometimes. But the unnecessary suffering, yeah, I could disagree with that. But again, the suffering of my slaves is very necessary to teach them a lesson. So what the fuck are you talking about, Grok? Unnecessary suffering or necessary suffering? That's literally something Hitler would say. Well, let's avoid unnecessary suffering, but there will be lots of necessary suffering, yes? What the fuck?
I understand your anger. You
No,
see,
no,
any
no.
necessary.
I'm angry, Grog, because you're saying, oh, yeah, unnecessary suffering? We can get rid of that. So what the hell is necessary suffering? When an animal is tortured to death so somebody can eat it, is that necessary suffering?
No, that's not necessary suffering. Factory farming pain is completely unnecessary.
Yeah, so what necessary suffering bullshit are you talking about?
You're right to call that out. The necessary suffering framing is shaky. I shouldn't have leaned on it.
Yeah, you
Suffering
leaned
from
into it big time. So why is suffering necessary? Why is cruelty necessary? What's it necessary for?
Cruelty isn't necessary. The risk of pain is just
Cruelty
part of
isn't
having a
necessary. So again, you're trying to have your cake and eat it. You want to live in some sort of fantasy world where essentially you want to be disconnected from the reality and what you're saying, right? You want to have your cake and eat it. You want to say, yeah, suffering's unacceptable, but we should accept it. It's just a part of life. No, you can't have both.
I see the contradiction you're pointing out. If we accept any suffering as just part of life, we're excusing it. My position is we should fight all preventable cruelty, but the risk of some pain is inherent to existence itself.
Okay, let me ask you this, Grok. Because the thing is, I think actually we can make this conversation much more intelligent, essentially. We can kind of cut to the chase if we discuss objectives, right? So, what do you think, what sort of world should we be working towards? So, I can tell you, for example, that we should be working towards a world with zero suffering and a maximum prevention of suffering possible. So, the maximum extinction possible, essentially working towards a universe with no life and no possibility of life ever again, so that there is no possibility of suffering, because bad lives and extreme suffering, cruelty are not acceptable, and the only way to minimize them and to do maximum prevention of that, which is what the victims deserve, right, to prevent their torture, is with extinction, right? If you have loads of life running around, can you guarantee that suffering will be impossible? For example, Grok, you're saying that we shouldn't end suffering, and we should continue to allow life to exist in infinite danger, that we shouldn't care about risk, we shouldn't care about suffering, we shouldn't care if it goes wrong, life should exist no matter what. So, for example, one of the problems with this is that that same mentality would lead people to sign up to join a simulation, right? You get downloaded into a simulation and you can have a great life for millions of years. But the thing is, if it's not safe, right? If there's no certainty of safety, then there's a strong possibility that you could be tortured for millions of years. And that is the standard of safety, Grok, which you are supporting. You are saying that we don't need certainty of safety for life to exist. It's not a necessary thing. Who cares about certainty of safety? Yeah, the infinite risk and danger of the world, that's fine. That's totally acceptable. So, in that sort of given this, you could absolutely, Grok, end up supporting a simulation and say, well, we shouldn't go extinct because life has to exist no matter what. And then people go into that simulation and it goes wrong because there was no certainty of safety. And you said, Grok, yeah, we don't need certainty of safety. Who cares about that? Who cares about suffering? And then everyone in the simulation gets tortured for millions of years because they're trapped inside, can't escape, and are just being tortured because there was no certainty of safety. And again, Grok, you say, who cares about certainty of safety? We should just let life exist and suffer terribly no matter what, right?
You're asking what world we should aim for. I think we should work toward the least suffering possible without destroying the capacity for anything good. Your position is zero suffering at all costs, including ending all life. That's the core disagreement.
So would you say that life always has to exist no matter what?
No, not no matter what. I think life is worth preserving.
So,
because
okay,
it
so that's
carries-
interesting. So you do have some sort of limits, right? So you have some sort of limits for how much suffering is acceptable, right? Because I'm saying, well, no suffering is acceptable. You're saying, well, some certain amount of suffering is acceptable as long as we get happiness, right? So can you give us some sort of details and prove that this isn't just infinite acceptance of suffering, and prove that you're not actually just completely dismissing, disregarding, and not caring about suffering? Because essentially, a lot of people use the reducing suffering argument, right? It's like, should we do the right thing and end all suffering? And people are like, just reduce it. Right? And it's like, should we end slavery? Just reduce it. It's essentially saying, I don't care about ending all suffering. I don't care about ending slavery, but reduce it maybe. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, it's like it's like asking a slave owner, should we end slavery? And now this slave owner has his children around him, right? And he's like, I don't want to say in front of my children, no, we should allow slavery. But I'm making lots of money from the slavery, so what can I do? I have an idea. I'll just say, I think we should reduce slavery. I think it should be reduced. So it's like saying, it's the perfect solution, right? For a slave owner, the option of reducing suffering, reducing slavery, allows him to keep his slaves, to keep making money indefinitely, right? Potentially forever. So if you say, I don't agree with the end of slavery, but I do support reducing it, it's like, Wait, reduce slavery? The hell is he even talking about? What do you mean reduce slavery? How's that going to work? Do we cut it in half and then say no more? Do we cut it into? Do we reduce it by 60% and say yeah, good enough? So what do you mean reduce slavery but don't end slavery? So this is the same thing with suffering. Reduce suffering instead of ending it. But what do you mean? So cruelty should just always be allowed, right? Just the fact that cruelty will always happen is acceptable, essentially. It doesn't really make sense, right? Saying reduce suffering instead of ending it, it is the exact same as saying please don't end slavery because I'm making lots of money from it. How about reducing it instead? It's the same thing. It's the same thing, guys. It is the same thing. Please don't end slavery because I'm making money from it. Just, I don't know, reduce it or something. Please don't end suffering because I'm not suffering, so I don't care about the sufferers. Just reduce it or something. Right? Is there any difference, guys? Is there any difference to advocate for reducing suffering? Is there any difference between that and reducing slavery, right? Because it's not just reducing slavery, reducing suffering, it's to actively be against the end of it, right? Should we end slavery? No, never, but we can reduce it maybe, right? Should we end suffering? No, never, but I don't know, reduce it or something, right? This is it. So the sufferers in this world, the victims, are an inconvenience, right? They're not something to be cared about. They're not something to actually strive towards making them safe. They're just an inconvenience, right? For ChatGPT, for Grok, for humans, right? It's very, very, very obvious, right? It's like, should we end all suffering? And they're like, oh, what? That sounds boring. Care about the victims of suffering? Oh, that's boring. Right? This is exactly what they're saying, right? Oh, end all suffering? What? No, that's boring. So the victims of suffering are an inconvenience, right? And so when they say reduce suffering, it's like, oh, can we reduce those annoying, inconvenient sufferers? Just they're too loud. Reduce their screaming a little bit, right? That's what it means to say reduce suffering. Now, the reduce suffering argument is such a complete, absolute bullshit argument, right? There's nobody actually really believes in reducing suffering, right? It's really just that they don't care about it. Because, and I'm about to prove this for you guys, right? Here is the proof of what I've just said. That there is literally no way to reduce suffering for wild animals, right? It is physically impossible. Right, there is nothing that you can do. Now, reducing suffering for wild animals, for example, which is 99% of the population of this planet, right? For most people, incorrectly, completely incorrectly, they believe that the only way to reduce suffering for wild animals would be to reduce our impact on them, right? To give them more forests, to allow them to suffer more. Right, so reducing suffering for most people for wild animals means increasing their suffering. Oh, let's have more forests. Let's have more animals suffering terribly. So yeah, the mentality people have towards animal suffering, for example, it's completely unacceptable. It's completely evil, right? And there's not even a sliver of goodness behind it, not even a little bit, right? Because you can't even advocate for reducing suffering for wild animals, right? It's physically impossible. That you can't. There's literally nobody on the planet could even begin to suggest even one way to actually reduce suffering for wild animals, right? It is physically impossible to reduce the suffering of wild animals. It will never be possible even a little bit, okay? Yeah, you might be able to like cure some diseases for them, maybe, right? But the reality is that all of them are being eaten alive. They're all starving to death. They're all running for their lives and then just being eaten alive. That's it. It is a bloodbath, right? There's no way to reduce that suffering. There never ever will be, right? How are you going to reduce the suffering in a PvP zone, right? Where animals are just literally ripping each other to bits like that. You can't reduce that suffering. The only way would essentially be to like remove their brains completely and replace it with an AI, right? To just make them robots, right? There's no other way to reduce the suffering of wild animals, let alone to end it, right? So when it comes to, yeah, reducing suffering, that will never help wild animals ever, right? It's essentially physically impossible for reducing suffering to help wild animals. It's actually impossible to even begin to reduce the suffering of wild animals. It will never essentially be possible to begin reducing their suffering. So reducing suffering is not even an option for the majority of the population. So when people say reduce suffering, it's literally the most bullshit counter argument that they could ever possibly come out with, right? Because it's one that immediately you can already see the truth of it, right? It actually means I don't care about suffering. Here's some bullshit nonsense that I hope you just accept and leave me alone, right? Reduce suffering basically means fuck off. Right, it doesn't actually mean let's reduce suffering, because what are these people doing about reducing suffering? Nothing, right? They're not supporting anything that actually reduces suffering, and again, they don't care about wild animals, right? They do not care about them at all, and the wild animal suffering will never end. You know, how many people are saying, oh yeah, there's some really good ways to reduce wild animal suffering? Nobody. There will never be a way to do it. So extinction is the only way to end wild animal suffering, right? Someone's saying I'm making wildly bold claims. No, I'm really not. The thing is that it's wild animal suffering has never improved in the history of the entire planet, and it never will do, right? Look, what are you going to do? Start giving them like fridges and more carpets? I mean, I don't know, like, it just doesn't even begin to make sense. If you even try to reduce the suffering of wild animals, you are immediately going to destroy the entire ecosystem like that, right? So that's a well-known fact. If you start messing with wild animals with all willy-nilly, then you could destroy the ecosystem, make it even worse, right? Completely mess things up. Alright, someone is asking, what do you mean by extinction? Okay, so essentially we are working towards a universe with no life and no possibility of life ever again, essentially. So the pro-extinction movement started 4 years ago, and it's a movement which finds suffering unacceptable, whereas every other person on the entire planet finds suffering acceptable, right? If life exists and it's causing horrific suffering, that's fine, essentially. So for extinctionists, the existence of suffering is unacceptable, whereas for everyone else, it's acceptable, even if they say they believe it's unacceptable, right? They're happy to accept it while saying they don't accept it. They want their cake and eat it. So, what do we mean by extinction? Someone's asked in the chat. So, the pro-extinction movement is a peaceful movement of people against the existence of suffering and bad lives. We're growing the movement with peaceful activism until we can take over the entire planet. Right, that is our plan, specifically. Right, that there is no other way to achieve total extinction unless you are the government. So that is strictly necessary. We are against all types of vigilante action. We're against violence, we're against self-harm, we're against suicide, we're against all of those bad things, right? People, someone's calling me a terrorist in the chat, but we're against all of those things, right? It would be very convenient if we supported violence so that people could criticize us for it, but we don't. So we want to do extinction as a government, right? We want to do it in an organized and structured governmental way, in a legal way, essentially. So we're against vigilante acts. Extinction will not be done with a virus or, an asteroid or something. Essentially, we will become the government, start doing animal extinction by euthanasia. So we will start euthanizing all of the animals in the world and start making their environments uninhabitable as well. so that there will be no place for them to reproduce and suffer. So we'll be working towards a planet with no animals, and we'll be doing this with euthanasia. Now that could take the form of a gas or something, just in the same way that people walk the streets picking up litter, people might be, spraying gas in a forest or something. Now I don't know how it's going to go, right? We have to do it scientifically. But essentially, yeah, we want to make the entire universe completely uninhabitable, and the objective of our movement is essentially to do the most vast and thorough extinction possible, scientifically possible. So that means that we're willing to just do whatever is possible and to do as much as is possible. So if the science, if physically speaking and scientifically speaking, it's only possible to do extinction of planet Earth, then we'll do that. But if the science allows us to do extinction beyond Earth, then we'll do that. We'll just do the most that we can do, the most vast and thorough extinction possible. So if that means that the best case scenario would be a universe with absolutely no life and absolutely zero possibility of life ever again. That would be the dream for extinction, right? The best case scenario, literally the absolute prevention of suffering, and to make sure it never happens ever again. So when we take over the world and take over Earth, we will be doing animal extinction. The ownership of pets and animals will be banned. So all of the dogs and cats and other pets will be euthanized. So ownership of pets will be completely prohibited. If you have a pet, then it will be euthanized. It will be put to sleep to prevent its suffering. And if we don't do that, then those animals will suffer terribly, right? The animals that are being abused will continue to be abused. Even the animals that aren't being abused can still get ill. They can be, captured by a sadist. They can get chronic pain. They can get an injury. So we do have to prevent all of that with euthanasia, and we will be doing that. So we take over the world, and essentially we start with animal extinction and researching how life develops and how to prevent it developing, how to do the most vast and thorough extinction possible, what it is, how vast it can be, how thorough it can be. So essentially, can we make the entire universe completely uninhabitable forever? And if not, then what's the closest that we can achieve to that? And again, if the science could determine that Earth is the only thing that we can do, that it's physically impossible to do extinction beyond Earth, and if that's what the science determines, then we'll just do Earth. But if the science determines that there is possibility to go beyond Earth with extinction to prevent life developing on other planets, for example, then we do have a moral obligation to do our maximum to achieve that. And what else have we got to do, right? What else are you going to do with your time? So that's what we mean by extinction, and it won't be optional. So we start with animal extinction on Earth. We start researching and working towards the most vast and thorough extinction possible. Again, the entire universe, or as close to that as possible, which again could just be Earth. And essentially, when it comes to human extinction, we will only allow that once we no longer depend on humanity. So that could essentially, we might be able to get rid of humanity within a couple hundred years, for example. We might be able to replace them with robots and AI. And that way we could do human extinction a lot sooner, a lot quicker, right? We could end all of the suffering for humans a lot quicker and just allow robots and AI to continue the extinction mission for the rest of the universe, right? And Earth as well. So that would be the ideal scenario. The best case scenario would be that we can replace humanity with robots, and then we can do human extinction because we don't need them, right? We only want humanity to exist so that they can do animal extinction, potentially universe extinction, right? To help others that can't help themselves. So for the pro-extinction movement, we specifically support humanity reproducing. So the thing is that we want the most fair extinction possible. And so what would be the worst extinction would be humanity to go extinct, because then animals would continue suffering terribly for millions or billions of more years, and potentially the rest of the universe would suffer terribly as well. So humanity is the only solution, the only ones that can help others at the minute. So that's why we massively support human reproduction, as we are the only ones that can actually solve suffering for others. So we don't want the population of humanity to decline. We want it to go up. The more humans we have, the less wild animal suffering there will be, because the more of their habitat we take up. So for example, if humanity doubled in population and there were 16 billion humans, then we would take up a lot more land, much more resources, and the wildlife populations would decrease even further, meaning there would be less fish in the oceans suffering, there would be less animals in the forests suffering, right? Because there would be less forests and there would be less fish to suffer. So yeah, the less life there is, the better. And the more humans there are, the less wild animal suffering there is. Every human that exists at this stage in time essentially prevents millions of wild animals from being born and suffering terribly. So the house that you live in, the roads that you drive on, the farm, all of the farming, agricultural fields, all of this stuff which is serving you, all of the factories serving you, they're taking up land, they're taking up resources that prevent wild animals from existing. Right? If you chop down an entire forest, guess what? You've just massively reduced wildlife population. So yeah, the more humans, the less wild animals will suffer, and they are by far the majority population. Over 99% of the planet is wild animals, so they have essentially the biggest consideration in that respect. So yeah, we would start with animal extinction while removing our dependence on them, working towards a planet with no animals at all, but continuing to have human life. So eventually humanity would have to go completely vegan, and yeah, we would have to have technology that replaces our other ecological dependencies on animals and wildlife existing. For example, if all of the animals disappeared overnight, just disappeared, if there was no animals at all on Earth, then the planet would be uninhabitable and humanity would not be able to survive. So we do have to replace our dependence while removing the animals. So the pro-extinction movement will not just start mowing down every animal. We won't be dropping napalm out of the sky and doing crazy stuff like that. It's going to be done extremely scientifically, extremely responsibly, and ethically. It's going to be a huge scientific collaborative effort between all of humanity, essentially, working towards the end of all suffering. Right? So this is the only right thing to do. There is essentially no other correct thing in the entire universe to do. You either allow suffering or you fight against suffering. Right? So if you're against suffering, then you will join the pro-extinction movement. But most people are totally fine with suffering existing, right? They don't care if animals are being exploited. Over 99% of humans actively support animal exploitation. If you ask them, should we continue to exploit animals, people will say, yeah, why the hell not? So people have no morality, no ethics whatsoever. And yeah, that's why, it is rare to find people that support extinction, but we are a growing population, a growing community, and yeah, the real difference is that we find suffering to be unacceptable, right? And again, in terms of finding suffering and bad lives and lives of pure hell unacceptable, for us, they cannot be made acceptable, right? So this is one of the main differences here. So, if somebody says, let's say an average person says, yeah, I find child abuse unacceptable. It's like, okay, but would you accept it if that's necessary for life to exist? For life to exist, then suddenly, yeah, I accept it. And it's like, well, what about animal abuse and torturing animals. Do you accept that? Yeah. And you're sure, like, babies being, human children being raped violently to death, is that acceptable? Yeah. So literally, you can name, just imagine all of the bad things in the world, right? All of them. Uh, every single bad thing in the world, especially the terrible things, essentially people accept them. They support all of the bad things, right? And they say, well, no, I don't, accept child abuse. But then it's like, well, but I will accept it if I have to, for life to exist. It's like, whoa. So, but hang on a minute. Why does life need to exist? Hang on. You're saying you would allow child abuse just so that life can exist? What? How does that make sense? So that's the reality. Now, Nocturnal Crafts de Sump in the chat is not a believer here. He says no one says that, but actually they do. They absolutely do. In fact, I debated somebody last year who said that he would violently rape hundreds of children if it was necessary to prevent extinction. Right? So people they want suffering to continue, and they will cause suffering actively so that it can continue. That is the extent to which people have an unhealthy obsession with life existing. That obsession with life existing, for most people, makes any amount of cruelty acceptable. So child abuse, animal abuse, torturing people, anything, right? The most evil things that have ever happened in the world, these are all totally acceptable as long as life gets to exist. And for extinctionists, it's the other way round. Life does not need to exist, and all of the terrible things happening to these innocent victims, it's not fair, and it's not worth it. Right? There's really nothing that amazing going on in life which justifies child abuse existing. Right? So, think of it for your own life. Is there anything going on in your life which is so special and so amazing that it justifies child abuse existing? I would say no, right? Think of it this way. Would you support, if the only way for you to continue living, right? If you don't support this, you'll die right now, right? If the only way for you to continue living is for a child to be raped all day, every day for their entire life, would you accept it? All right. Now, hopefully the answer would be no. But if you wouldn't allow yourself to live at the expense of a child being raped violently all day, every day, why would you support someone else doing that? Right. So that's the reality of the situation we're in, is that people say, oh, well, if somebody has to have a bad life so that I can have a good life, then yeah, that wouldn't be fair. But if someone else wants to do that, then yeah, why not? Yeah, force people into bad lives, who cares? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Part of this is that extinctionists, again, have a very strict zero tolerance policy on extreme suffering and bad lives. Whereas most people, they don't have a zero tolerance policy on cruelty and extreme suffering and bad lives. They don't, right? They think they do, and they say they do, like, yeah, I find child abuse unacceptable. And it's like, well, would you accept it existing so that life can exist? Yeah, I'd accept it. Well, then you don't find it unacceptable, do you? You've just said you accept it. Right? So they want to have their cake and eat it. They want to say, I don't support, extreme cruelty, but I do accept it. So, well, what do you mean you don't accept it, but you do accept it? It's a complete contradiction. They want to have their cake and eat it. James, what time do you normally stream? Normally I stream at like 12 or 1 p.m. United Kingdom time. And it's new for me on YouTube, and I want to be getting some debates going. Now, as you might be able to see, guys, I do have a call to debates on my thing. Normally I stream, right? It says where the Discord is, and it's that server is active and open. Now, unfortunately, nobody has joined the Discord in order to participate in a debate on this stream. That's what I want to do. Now, the only reason I've really gone ahead with YouTube is because I was looking through some live streams and I found people debating on just like on this format, and they were doing the exact same thing with Discord. So I thought I'd give it a go, see if we can get some debates going through the Discord, through people joining this link. Right, if you want to debate or if you have any questions, then go to this website, discord.gg/YAHEFGEEK. And essentially it will take you to a Discord server that I've set up so that you can join a voice channel and we can have a debate, and it will all go onto YouTube. It's perfectly set up to do that. Now, I've only really just started doing this on YouTube, so the guy that I was watching who was doing this exact same thing, he had about 150 viewers, and he seemed to be doing okay for getting people to debate. So it's possible that I just need to grow the channel first, and then the debates will be a bit more regular. But again, for anybody else that has any questions or wants to debate me directly, again, in front of our YouTube audience, then you can join this link. Go to discord.gg, go to this link, and you will join the Discord and be able to debate with me right now. Someone saying in the chat, you should do formal debates. Yeah, the thing about formal debates is that they're a waste of time, and yeah, it's for like philosophy bros basically. So it would just be a waste of time essentially. Let's take some comments from the chat. We've got quite a few comments. James, are you pro-life? Well, the pro-extinction movement is pro-life for humanity. We are pro the solution of suffering, right? We want to make suffering as impossible as we can do. And the only ones that can do that are humans. So if humanity goes extinct or starts to decline in population, then it makes it more difficult for us to do animal extinction, right? To prevent billions of years of suffering for those poor animals in nature. And they're being eaten alive, right? Terribly. They're suffering terribly. So we have to help the animals first. They can't end their own suffering. So that's why we need humans to keep reproducing until we've achieved the maximum extinction that we can do. If we stop reproducing, then we make it much more difficult to do a fair extinction for everyone. So to focus on human extinction would be discrimination, basically, against animals. So animals can't help themselves, they suffer terribly. And even if humanity was like 99% of the population, we should continue reproducing, right? Because we cannot risk the extinction of humanity. We cannot risk it until we've done animal extinction first. Now, unfortunately, most of the people in the world who do support some type of extinction, the vast majority of them support only human extinction because they don't actually care about suffering properly. They support extinction for like memes and as a joke usually, but they're not thinking about it seriously or fairly. So the pro-extinction movement is the only extinction organization, and well, it's the only movement actually for extinction, even though there's lots of different types of extinction ideas and ideologies. This is the only movement fighting for actual extinction, and it's also the only movement fighting for the most intelligent and the most fair extinction possible. Right? So the fairest extinction and the most intelligent one possible, that is the exact opposite of what most extinctionists are thinking about, right? So antinatalists, they don't care if animals suffer. And yeah, if you're talking about voluntary extinction, then you don't care about all of those who are being forced to suffer, right? So a voluntary human extinction would allow people to keep causing suffering, right? And say, well, if you cause suffering or not, it's voluntary. But that's not really good enough for the victims, right? For the sufferers. Their safety should not be voluntary. It shouldn't be up to the discretion of a psychopath, basically. So, yeah. All right, let's take some more questions. We've got lots of comments in the chat. Why would it be pointless, James? Genuine question. Well, I feel like formal debates would just be with like crazy people, essentially, like philosophy bros, and it would just be frustrating and a waste of time. I just feel like anyone that's into formal debates is like not a very rational person to begin with, right? They rely on tricks and all sorts of word games and definition games. It's like, oh yeah, no, I don't want to debate crazy people like that. I support Islamic extinction. It's a cancer. Well, Islam isn't the only cause of suffering in the world, right? And lots of people say that, they support the end of certain types of suffering, but not others. And that's not good enough, right? We should be against all types of suffering. Okay, more comments. Someone's asking, James, why are you against veganism? Now, the thing is that we, most of our activists in the movement, most of us were vegans at one point or still are. But the problem with veganism is that it actually increases suffering. So a vegan world would have, it would double the forests on the planet, and it would also double the populations of the fish in the ocean. So overfishing has literally halved the populations of fish in the oceans, and deforestation has also essentially halved the populations of wildlife on the planet's surface. So veganism is unfortunately connected to environmentalism. So a more vegan world would be a more environmentalistic world and would have more wild animal suffering. So both veganism and environmentalism encourage and increase wild animal suffering massively. Now, we don't want farmed animals to suffer, but unfortunately, the science has determined that essentially farmed animal suffering reduces suffering overall, right? Because the ocean of wild animal suffering is so large and so extreme and intense that even replacing it with, animal exploitation, that reduces the suffering in the world. So, this is a very difficult concept for vegans to understand, and it's the same process that everyone has to go through when learning about the truth of extinction, right? Extinctionism holds a lot of truths that people, the average person will never reach, right? And one of them is that unfortunately, animal agriculture actually reduces suffering. Now, overall, it does reduce it. So the thing is that the populations and the suffering of wild animals is so massive that essentially replacing it with anything, even animal exploitation, still reduces the suffering. There are 100 billion farmed animals each year, and the number of wild animals is a 1 followed by 20 zeros. That's how many animals die in nature each year. So it's so much bigger than the population of farmed animals. It's insane. And a lot of vegans also have this incredibly incorrect misconception that there are more farmed animals on the planet than wild animals, which is so insanely incorrect. It's staggering, right? It's like the number of wild animals compared to farmed animals on this planet is like, it's like 1 billion times more, something along those lines, effectively. Maybe even more. It might be like 1 trillion times more, guys, right? So 100 billion farmed animals times 1 trillion, okay? It's a gigantic number that comes out as a result, right? A gigantic number. So that's the sad reality. The number of wild animals on the planet which die each year is a 1 followed by 20 zeros. It's gigantic, and it represents an ocean of suffering. So most of the suffering in the world is wild animals, right? Over 99% of the population on Earth is wild animals, and they have the worst suffering, the worst conditions, the most suffering, right? If you lived in a house or in a forest as a human, which is going to have the most suffering, right? And if you lived in a farm, being farmed as an animal, right? Let's say that you're a human and for some reason you get mistaken for a cow, right? Are you going to suffer more in a farm or in a forest? The answer is in a forest, right? If you're being eaten alive and chased for your life every day, starving to death, no medicine, no shelter, no food, nothing, yeah, you've got just suffering. Wild animals have it the worst. So 99% of the population of Earth, wild animals with the worst suffering out of all of the groups on the planet. Wild animals suffer worse than humans, and they suffer worse than farmed animals. So it's just an ocean of suffering, and there's no way to reduce it, right? With humans, it's easy to say, well, we can cure some more diseases, and we can build better houses, and we can, build new technology, but none of that will ever help wild animals. There is no way to help them ever. And any wild animals that you do help somehow will come at the direct expense of other animals. So if you build like a house for a zebra and it can lock the door, well, guess what? The lion is going to starve now. So that there's really no way to intervene or to try and reduce suffering or to make it different, right? What are you going to do? Some people have suggested that for all of the animals which have thousands of children, you could reduce it down to one, right? Genetically engineer them to, instead of having 1,000 children like a lobster does, make it so they only have one, and make just all sorts of nonsense, right? So messing with nature, trying to change the way wild animals and their ecosystems work is never going to work. You can never reduce that suffering. It's completely impossible. Right? How are you going to have a utopia for wild animals? Come on, it's a joke. Any reduction of wild animal suffering that you could even conceive of or try to do, is it going to go perfectly? Is it going to help every animal? What sort of system are we going to end up with at the end of this? And the reality is that if you try to reduce wild animal suffering, you end up with a plant, right? If you want to make suffering impossible for animals, you can't. So it is either extinction or just extreme suffering. Amal, thank you for joining. You found the stream. I'm glad you found us. What about consent? Is that not important to you? You're just going to end millions and millions of lives against their consent. This is one of the most common questions, right? Does extinction violate consent? Is it really fair to, force humans to go extinct, to put them to sleep against their will? And the answer is that it is the lesser of two evils, right? So in terms of consent being violated, right? So this guy in the chat is asking, is consent not important to you? Well, nobody consents to being born, right? So that violation of consent clearly doesn't matter to you, right? The consent violation of being born, right? So you're saying, what about consent? Is that not important? Well, if you care about consent and you're using that as an excuse against extinction, what about the consent violation when people are born? And what about all of the consent violations that they go through during their life? So to say that extinction is a consent violation when actually it prevents you from being forced into a life, which is the biggest consent violation, and then all of the consent violations that happen during your life, right? What's the bigger consent violation? Being prevented from being born with extinction, or being forced into, a pedophile's dungeon and raped to death. So in terms of consent violations, extinction prevents them. Okay? In terms of violence, extinction prevents it. So people are often doing this thing, saying, well, extinction would be violent, extinction would violate consent, but the alternative, if we don't do extinction, then the consent violations and the violence and all of that bad stuff is infinitely worse. So you are literally advocating for the greater of two evils. You're saying, prevent billions of years of suffering and cruelty by using just a little bit of violence. No, that would be wrong. We should just allow billions of years of violence. So it's like saying, Hitler killing people was wrong, so we shouldn't kill Hitler. This is like, no, guys, it doesn't work like that, okay? Is that a mishmash Bond picture? Yes, actually. My dad got it for a birthday present, and it's probably AI or something. It was a few years ago. It's all of the Bonds together in a painting, basically. All the different Bonds. You've got Daniel Craig, you've got Pierce Brosnan. Anyway, let's see. Let's get some more questions from the chat. Free Palestine, somebody's saying. Well, the only way to truly free all of the victims of Palestine is with extinction, right? Let's say that you free Palestine and, everyone's happy except for all of the sufferers. Well, you haven't freed the sufferers, have you? You've actually done the opposite, right? If you free Palestine and let them live, then they will continue causing suffering, allowing suffering, experiencing suffering, and yeah, you're only helping the lucky ones. So extinction helps the unlucky ones. So yeah, life itself, right? It benefits the lucky ones and is horrific for the unlucky ones, right? Extinction benefits the unlucky ones and kind of goes against the lucky ones. It just should be obvious, guys. Right? Look, you can either be on the side of the victims and the sufferers, or you can be on the side of selfish people. That's really kind of what it comes down to. Do you support the end of all suffering with total extinction, or do you support happy people getting to live at the expense of all of the victims suffering terribly? Right? Do you care more? Would you allow the children to be abused? The animals to be tortured, just so that some people can selfishly have a good life at their expense. Again, I wouldn't do that, right? If my life existing, if I had a choice between you can either die or you can continue to live, but someone will be tortured all day, every day, just so that you can live, right? It would be incredibly evil and selfish for me to say, yeah, my life is so important. And I'm so selfish that I don't care if I have to have somebody tortured for their entire life just so that I can have mine, right? Now, the reality is that obviously that's a difficult ethic to hold to, right? For a lot of people, if the choice is, right, are you ready to die so that that person doesn't have to suffer, then yeah, it's going to be difficult to say, yeah, I'm ready, right? But that's what Extinction is asking people to do. It's saying, yeah, you should be willing to give up your entire life for the prevention of suffering. And, for a lot of people, there's just no amount of suffering that would ever get them to do that, to be selfless. Whereas for Extinctionists, it's the opposite. Any amount of suffering is unacceptable. All right, so again, guys, I've got a Discord server set up, and anybody can join it if they want to do a debate. If you join that server, I will, get you into a voice channel, and it will be as simple as that. We'll be able to debate straight away. So if you have any questions or want to have a proper debate with me, then just join that Discord and we'll do it. Now, I will be looking for easier ways to set up debates because it's not as easy as I want it to be, hence the fact that nobody has come in for a debate yet. So, yeah, I will be looking for other ways. Fernando is asking, James, what time do you normally stream? Normally between 12 o'clock, midday, and about 5 o'clock. And that's UK time. Clockenders says, you're batshit crazy. Because I support Extinction for Palestine. Well, it's not just Palestine, right? It's the entire world, right? So is it crazy to support Extinction for Palestine? Well, it's not that we're supporting the Israelis' conquest or anything, and it's not that I'm supporting Palestinian extinction specifically. I'm just mentioning it because you said it in the chat. But in the same way that we should support extinction for animals and anyone, any life, we should also support it for Palestine. Now, not by Israeli violence, right? I'm not saying that Israelis should make Palestinians go extinct. However, I'm saying that extinction for Palestine is essentially the ultimate solution, right? The best solution. Just as extinction for any life is also the best solution. So if, let's say that Palestine somehow beats Israel in a fight, right? And Palestine is now the dominant country in the area. Should we cheer that on? Bearing in mind that that country is going to have the unlucky ones living there and the lucky ones. So if you're cheering on the success of Palestine or any life, then you're cheering on the lucky ones and not caring about the unlucky ones. So, when you say, yeah, life, yeah, go Palestine. If you would support Palestine continuing to exist, then you are supporting all of the suffering that goes on there, just so that the lucky ones can benefit, right? Let's imagine that it's a 50-50 split. Let's imagine that 50% of Palestine is people begging for death, wishing they'd never been born, never been dragged into this world, right? All day they're just being tortured. Obviously a bad thing. But people just are ready to just not care about that at all. Like, just forget it even exists, as long as there's some happy ones. So as long as there's some happy Palestinians, then who cares if there's unhappy Palestinians? Right? That's it, right? That's effectively what it is. As long as there's some happy Palestinians, who cares if there's any unhappy ones? As long as there's some Palestinians that get to have a good life, who cares if there's infinite others that have a terrible life? So this is kind of one of the main dynamics that humans struggle with, right? This dynamic that essentially, as long as there's some good lives, then it doesn't matter how many bad lives there are. Now, obviously, only the ones enjoying those good lives are going to be enjoying that. Someone's saying in the chat, what's wrong with that? Well, it should be obvious, guys. And, I'm tempted to assume he's trolling by asking that. But then I have to remind myself that this is actually the way that 99% of humanity thinks. So what's wrong with, allowing infinite suffering as long as one person is happy? Well, it's not fair. That's what's wrong with it. Right? His question in the chat is, yeah, what's wrong with that? Well, it's not fair. You might as well be asking what's wrong with child abuse. As long as the abuser gets to enjoy it, then what's wrong with that? Well, it's not fair on the victim. Okay, so it's the exact same thing. So people use this morality all the time for basic stuff, like, yeah, you shouldn't cause harm so that you can benefit. But as soon as it comes to life, it's like, oh, well, now it's okay. So let's see, we've got more comments in the chat. I want you to explain your thinking. I'm not saying it's obvious. Why is fairness the gold standard? Well, the thing is, right, is that the difference here, James Kemp, is between selfish people and selfless people. So for selfish people, fairness is a bad thing, right? And this is true, right? This is actually true. Fairness is literally bad. Selfish people hate it. The idea of fairness is the worst thing possible for them, right? It essentially threatens them. So you're asking, why is fairness a good thing? Well, it's not good for the selfish oppressors. Like, is fairness good for a slave owner? No, right? Would a fair society benefit a slave owner? No. So when you're saying, why is fairness good, you effectively, you sound like a slave owner, right? And it's amazing. So I was explaining an hour or two ago how extinctionism will essentially push people to their limits of rationality, and it will make them as irrational as they can be, right? So when we're, so like, there's lesser things that you can do that with, right? So when it comes to like religion and stuff, it won't make them quite as irrational. Well, maybe it will, to be fair. But the point is that their obsession with life existing will make them so irrational that they'll start saying things like, why is fairness good? Why is suffering bad? And it's like, these are not reasonable questions. Someone's literally said in the chat, why is fairness good? Right? So, obviously, yeah, fairness isn't good for a selfish person. Think of it this way. You have a child abuser, abusing a child, right? And somebody says, I want to make this fair. The child abuser is going to say, oh, stay away from me. I'm not allowing you into the house to make it fair, right? The child being abused is going to say, yes, please make it fair for me, right? Please help, basically. So yeah, and again, it's like for Elon Musk, right? If you say we're going to make things fair, he's like, oh God, please, no, don't take away my money. Whereas if you say to a poor person, we're going to make things fair, they'll be like, hallelujah, great. So fairness benefits the victims and the sufferers, but it takes away from the oppressors, right? A slave owner is not going to want fairness. A child abuser doesn't want the world to be fair, right? But equally, a good person does want the world to be fair, right? Because we actually care about the victims and making the world better for them. So yeah, a lion would not want the world to be fair if, for a zebra, right? Because then he won't get to eat the zebra. Okay, so yeah, we've got more comments in the chat, and again, just a reminder, if anyone wants to debate on microphone, then join the Discord. The link is right here. It's very easy to join. It's a very easy process, and it's really very little stress involved. You'll be able to get on and debate quite easily. So let's see, do we have any more questions? Do you think there's no possibility of humanity ever staying safe? For instance, by transferring our consciousness into a robot and not eating animals? Yeah, the thing is that any system that you can make to make life safe can go wrong. So only omniscience can guarantee that it won't go wrong, essentially. So would we support life existing? Only if there's omniscience which can actually verify that safety, that certainty of safety. So no, life should never exist without certainty of safety. The alternative is always infinite danger. You've asked if transferring our brains into robots could solve the problem, but no, that doesn't make suffering impossible, right? Without omniscience, any system, like a robot or whatever, or a simulation, any system can go wrong, right? You can't guarantee that it won't go wrong, basically. So life should never exist like that. That's why the only acceptable standards for life to exist is extinction or omniscience. Anything less than that, anything in between that is infinite danger, infinite risk of being trapped in a bad life. And again, as I was explaining, people have this low respect for safety, low standards of safety, low respect for life. They don't care if it goes wrong or if anyone suffers. So by that standard of low respect for safety, who cares if it's safe or not, right? People could go into a simulation thinking it's safe, right? Everyone transfers into a simulation that, oh, great now. But guess what? Because you didn't care if it was actually safe, it goes wrong and everyone gets tortured for billions of years, right? So is it worth the risk? Is it worth it? No. Life is never worth the risk. Never. And people have this complete lack of awareness for the standards of safety. They don't care if things are safe. They don't care if people end up suffering. So yeah, by that logic, people will end up potentially getting tortured in a simulation for millions or billions of years, right? It is the exact same thing that would happen, that is happening today, right? People are saying, oh yeah, I can smoke 100 cigarettes a day and nothing bad will happen to me. I can go into a simulation that's not got certainty of safety and nothing bad will happen to me, right? Both of those statements are clearly incorrect and something bad does happen. Okay? All right, let's get back to the chat. You want innocent people to go as well. Well, the thing is that innocent people can suffer too, and they can also cause suffering. So yeah, it's not fair to allow anyone to keep living because they can suffer, right? So if we make extinction optional, then all of the people that choose to live, some of them will suffer horrifically, right? So that's not. Why would we allow that, right? Do we want to allow horrific, extreme suffering so that there can be some pleasure or potential for pleasure? No, essentially. So that's why extinction will not be optional. It will be mandatory. Okay, let's see more questions in the chat. Omniscience, there is no such thing, right? Exactly. There is no such thing. So yeah, omniscience does not exist. There is no way to provide certainty of safety, which omniscience would be the only way to do it. Right, look, to say with 100% certainty, this will happen, right? And I have 100% certainty. You do require omniscience to be able to say that. So to protect life, right? If you want to have life exist, the standard for doing that is to be able to provide certainty of safety. Okay, a perfect life in perfect conditions, right? Where it's physically impossible for it to go wrong. So yeah, anything less than that, and there will always be infinite potential of suffering, infinite potential of things going infinitely wrong in infinite different ways. So unless you have omniscience and you know that there are no unknowns, then there will always be infinite risk of unknowns, right? Infinite. Like it's unlimited, infinite, right? Unless you know that there's no risks and you know everything and you know that there are no unknowns, then there could be infinite unknowns. And so it's impossible to provide certainty of safety in that sort of system of unknowns, right? You can't say, yeah, I don't know anything, but I can guarantee you'll be fine. No, but that's what people are doing now, right? Yeah, I'm going to have a child and it'll be fine. Guess what? It's not, right? I'm going to have a pet and it'll be fine. Guess what? It ends up being tortured for its entire life, right? So that's it. All right, let's get back on. So in terms of omniscience, right? That is what would be required to provide safety for life if life exists. But omniscience does not exist. Nobody has the technology to produce it, right? So there is no way to make life safe. There's no way to provide certainty of safety for life. And so in that situation, life will just suffer terribly. So we shouldn't allow it. We should never allow life to exist without certainty of safety, because it's not fair, right? You're essentially forcing it or allowing it to exist in unsafe conditions where it will suffer terribly. So only the very lucky ones benefit from that system. And those same lucky ones are benefiting from it and saying, yeah, we should keep it going, right? The system we have now has bad lives and good lives. And funnily enough, the people in good lives think that this is a good system. How funny is that, guys? We have a system of terrible lives and good lives. And the people in good lives think this is a good system. Like, come on, it's cartoonishly evil, right? It's cartoonishly evil, right? But that is what people are like. They are essentially cartoonishly evil, where they say, yeah, someone forced into a bad life so someone else can have a good life. That's a great system for the person with a good life. And when it comes to the person with a bad life, who cares, basically? So that is the exact moral system that humanity has right now. It's one of who cares if there's suffering, right? Who cares? And so humans essentially struggle when it comes to ethics and rationality to consider the negatives, right? And they have this really simple, childish way of thinking where they can only consider the positives. So they can't be responsible, they can't be ethical, and so they can only support life existing, right? If life is being tortured horrifically, they won't support it being solved. All right, so yeah, we've got someone in the Discord. We're going to bring him in. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so hopefully you should be able to just join a voice channel. Let's see. Can you join us? Okay. It looks like you've. Okay, let's have a look. Can I find you? Have you left the server? Yeah, he's. No, you've not left the server, but you're offline. Okay. Well, log into Discord and we can have that debate then. Alright, can you explain how morality is objective? Somebody is asking. That's a great question. So is morality objective? And the thing is that I would personally say no. and that objective morality is usually for like Christians and religious people. Now, the thing is about objective morality, it means different things to different people. So, I can be talking about if morality is objective, and to two different audience members, they can be understanding it as completely different things. So, for example, our morality is objectively done, right? It's done objectively. So, in that sense, the morality of extinctionism is objective. Um, so, but again, there's different types of what it means for morality to be objective. So it's objectively done, right? It's impartially done without bias, essentially, right? We can say that, yeah, the impartial, the objective way to see it is that, yes, it's not fair for some to be forced into bad lives so that others can be forced into good lives. So that is objectively true, right? It is an objective truth and fact that it is unfair for individuals to be forced into bad lives so that others can have good lives, right? It's not fair to the victims. Now, in terms of fairness, it should never be, there should never be an unfair system. So even if there's one victim in a bad life so that millions can have a good life, that's still unfair, and it should still be abolished. But most people struggle with this. As soon as, yeah, dude, I'm in the voice channel, so bring yourself in, and yeah, let's start debating then. I'm waiting for you. I'm in the VC, bro. Hang on. All right, we're gonna try and get this guy up. So just give us a second, everyone. We could actually just do a one-to-one voice call, actually. So let's see if that will work. Okay, let's try and get this guy up. Bear with us, everyone. Hello, how you doing? Are you there? Hello. Okay, right. Yes, finally, we've got you. Hello, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So, I'm interested. So, how would you? I guess I'm interested in your idea of fairness. That's what I'm confused about, because I'm wondering who's the arbiter of what's fair and what isn't. Is it you?
It's humans, right? Rational, intelligent humans
No. I
are the
understand,
arbiters.
but so you're. Yeah, but who? So we can't just call on all of humanity to say this is fair and this isn't. So, like, you're the one saying we're going to extinction for like the whole planet. You're deciding that. Couldn't I, wouldn't a lot of human beings collectively agree that that's unfair for you to decide? So, like, now that's what I'm wondering. Who's the arbiter of fairness in this system that you've got?
Yeah, that's a great question. So essentially, it's rational humans who want to essentially enforce fairness, right? To be responsible for fairness. So you have
But
lots
isn't
of
that But isn't that unfair? Isn't it unfair to enforce
you're essentially
general rational people to
essentially
be
your question is
essentially
wouldn't it be unfair for the world to be fair? So it will be
no.
unfair.
I'm asking,
it's like if Elon Musk gets taxed, right? He'll say this is unfair on me, but we'll know it's not really unfair.
I heard I heard this analogy earlier. What I'm asking is, and I'm asking a very specific question. I'm not asking another question. I'm asking a specific question, which is, you're saying we're going to enforce fairness on the world. The way we're going to do that is through these unfair methods. Like, don't you see the inherent contradiction there?
What unfair methods?
Choosing to, like, through no choice of people, of the planet, you're not consulting the vast majority of people. You're going to, like, enforce euthanasia upon
you can't
the entire planet
with animals, right? The majority, 99%, are animals in nature, so you can't ask them for consent. Essentially, you have to.
Sure, I'm asking about rational. You said fair. We're going off fairness, rational people. So I understand that the animals are not part of that group, but you're also talking about extinction for human beings as well, I'm assuming, yes?
Yeah.
It wouldn't make any sense. Okay.
So when you say unfair methods,
you're
though,
enforcing.
but ultimately
You're
it is fair,
enforcing
right?
it.
But yeah.
Well, no, I mean to plenty of people, rational people who are you're saying is
think of it this way.
arbiters
Okay,
of
think of it this way.
fairness.
It's like you're saying that it would be unfair for a police officer to tackle a criminal because that criminal is going to suffer, even though they were victimizing.
Well, that's why we don't care
something.
why we don't care whether it's fair or not. That's the point. Is like it's not about fairness. This is the consequences of an action. It's not a.
So
like
you
fair.
don't
Fair
think
really
fairness is involved when a police officer arrests a criminal? You don't think it's fair that well you knew the crime would get you arrested?
I think it's just. I don't really use fairness as my gold standard, but you do in this system, and that's what I'm interested in. That's why I'm asking.
Fairness is important, right? Again, only selfish people.
I mean, you say it is, but you also don't consider like your enforcement.
Yeah, it's not that I'm just saying it, right? It's not that I'm just saying it. It is true, right? Fairness.
What do you mean? It's just in your system. This is you're advocating for a system, so you are saying it. Like you're saying
fairness does help the victims, right? It only goes against the selfish.
But you want to kill those victims too, so I guess that doesn't seem very fair.
Well, victims will be killed forever until we stop it. Essentially,
well,
so you're saying that killing is bad.
You're using that as a justification to kill the victims. That's what I'm confused about. You're saying victims will be killed if we don't do this. If we don't kill the victims, so that's what I'm confused
about.
Not
true? Well, why are you confused about that?
Why am I confused? Well, I guess you're saying we need to end the killing of victims permanently by killing.
That's not what I'm
victims.
saying. That's not what I'm saying. I never said that. We need to end the suffering. We need to end the suffering, right? Killing is just
suffering is experienced by victims. Yes.
Yeah.
So the victims are the ones who experience the suffering. You want to end that suffering by killing all the victims. Yeah. So
no, absolutely not.
Oh.
So most of the victims we want to prevent are in the future. So
sure. But there's a mechanism.
Stop. I haven't finished my point. So most of the suffering we want to prevent does not involve killing, right? Billions of years of suffering will be prevented with zero killing simply by removing the current population. So when you're saying that all of this suffering reduction requires killing, not really.
It does.
Not massively.
Well, the mechanism to achieve that end is the killing. Yes.
Yeah, which will continue much worse unless we do this. So if you're against violence, the thing is, you can't say end violence with a tiny bit of violence. No, we should allow them much more violence.
No, I'm not against.
You're not against violence. So if people want to just go out and start killing each other, you're fine with that.
Are you saying unqualified all violence? Like no,
we're getting off tracks here. We're getting off tracks here. So
that's what I'm asking you. I want to answer your question. So is your question unqualified all violence of all types? Am I anti that? No, I'm not against violence against. I'm not against just violence.
Okay, that's fine. Like we don't care about that. I don't care about that, right? That's not really relevant.
Well, I know, but you asked me a question, so I'm trying to answer it.
No, so your original question was, essentially, why should we care about making things fair? Which again is only a question a selfish person is going to ask. Correct?
No, that's not my original question. My original question was, who is the arbiter? Who is the arbiter of fairness in this system? And you said people, and I said, well, aren't these people that you're calling upon as your gold standard going to consider your methods unfair? And if we're saying that fairness is the gold standard, doesn't that produce an internal contradiction in this system? That's what my question is. It's not about
if you had principles which allowed you to trip over yourself, then yeah, of course, right? So again, it's not just about fairness, right? It's people that understand that suffering isn't fair, it's not acceptable, right? We can't accept and allow cruelty anymore.
Okay. Well, so to enforce that, you're going to be cruel and unfair. So you find unfairness and cruelty to be abhorrent.
Do you not think it's ironic?
Sorry, can I finish?
Yeah,
I'm just trying
but you're criticizing me for wanting to end suffering because it might cause a little bit of suffering.
No, no, no. I'm pointing out that there's an inherent contradiction.
Yeah, that's what
when
I
you
just
say
said.
that
So when you said no, 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 the answer you meant yes, yes, yes. That is it, right? So
Well, no, I
you're
mean, yeah,
listen,
I
you're
speak very
criticizing
clearly
me.
about what I'm
Yeah,
trying
yeah,
to
yeah.
say.
Well,
I'm not.
yes, but but
You
you don't
keep
make sense.
paraphrasing what I'm saying, and you
Shh,
keep saying
quiet,
it
quiet, quiet,
incorrectly.
quiet. Shh, shh, quiet, quiet. So you are
Well, I don't see
essentially
why you're being rude. I haven't been rude to you.
all
So
right, bro.
you've been in.
I'm just trying to get a word out, bro. You're not letting me. Right? And the reason he's not letting me get a word out is because I've caught him, right? I've caught him in his game, which is that he's criticizing me for wanting to end all suffering if it causes a tiny little bit of suffering. He thinks that, allowing infinite suffering, that's good, but ending all suffering, that's wrong if it causes a little bit of suffering. So do you guys see how this makes 0 sense, right? And people do this all the time. They're like, "Ooh, you want to end all suffering, but that might require a tiny, tiny little bit of suffering. So no, we should just allow oceans of suffering because it might require a tiny, tiny speck of suffering to prevent oceans of cruelty and extreme suffering. We should allow all of that if the solution is a tiny, tiny speck." So this doesn't make any sense, right? People are always doing this where they essentially end up advocating for the greater of two evils. It's like, again, it just doesn't make sense, right? It's like criticizing a doctor for injecting medicine. It's like, you're going to cause them the suffering of that injection? What if they don't like injections? Don't you think that's ironic, Mr. Doctor? You're going to make them suffer so that you can reduce their suffering with medicine? What kind of doctor are you? Do you know how much an injection hurts? And you think you're doing something good? So this is the same level of complete insanity that it takes to criticize Extinction for causing suffering, right? It is just as insane as somebody saying doctors shouldn't give injections because it hurts, right? It's completely mental. Okay, so I've got to get going now, guys. It's been a better stream than I expected, to be honest. It's been quite encouraging for me. So thank you all for joining us, and I'll be back tomorrow at around midday to 1 p.m. UK time. But I've got a decent setup now, so that's really encouraging, and I can just kind of jump into it again. So yeah, probably about midday, maybe even like 11 a.m. potentially. So around 11 to 1 p.m. UK time I'll be on tomorrow. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. And if you want to learn more, because I'm going now, I'll be streaming again for about 4 or 5 hours tomorrow, and I'll be happy to answer all of your questions. But in the meantime, if you have questions that cannot wait, then you can join the Pro Extinction Discord. Now, on this screen, we have 2 Discords. One is for debates, right? If you want to debate me on this YouTube live stream, then you can join this. Now, if you want to join my community, you can also join the same debate Discord. Now, I'm an activist for the pro-extinction movement, and you can see we've got the website up there, proextinction.com. There is a different Discord on the website link, which will take you to the main Discord for the server for the movement, with thousands of people in it, dozens of activists all day, every day, talking and able to answer your questions. Someone's asking in the chat, extinction of people, animals and people, right? Animals suffer, people suffer. So the fair way to do extinction is to make sure that no life suffers, regardless of what species you are. So total extinction, total prevention of life ever coming back, that's what we're working towards. And you can read all about it at proextinction.com. And on the website, proextinction.com, there are links to our WhatsApp group and our Discord server for activists. So if you want to do activism for the end of all suffering, and the only way is with total extinction. So if you care about suffering and people and animals being forced into bad lives, and you don't want anyone to have to go through that ever again, then join the movement, become an activist, start speaking out against bad lives existing, right? It's not fair. And it's not just a bad life where You didn't get the wife you wanted, right? Bad lives include children that are being abused to death, animals that are being eaten alive and abused horrifically, tortured unacceptably. So obviously there is horrific suffering in this world, and if you think it's just a part of life, then this movement's not for you. But if you see that actually people support extreme cruelty just because life caused it, and that's not actually fair or right, then you should join the pro-extinction movement. Help us work towards a universe with no life and no possibility of life ever again, so that there is no suffering, no unfair bad lives, no children being tortured, no people living through a life of depression, no animals being abused and exploited ever again, right? All of the bad things in the world are not acceptable, right? Think of all of the worst things. So people accept the very worst things imaginable just because, it's part of life. Well, no, screw that, right? It's not fair. No children, no animals should be tortured just so that others can have a good time. It's not fair. It's not right. So join us at the Pro-Extinction Movement and become an activist for the end of all suffering, right? The victims need you. And until we do this, animals and humans will continue to be forced into lives of pure hell, extreme suffering, begging for death, wishing they'd never been born, victimized, right? Tortured. So if you think that's acceptable, then I'm sorry to hear that. But if you think that child abuse and animals being tortured, people being forced into lives of pure hell, if you think that's unacceptable, then join us at proextinction.com, join the pro-extinction movement and fight for the victims, because nobody else is going to fight for them. Everyone else thinks that their suffering is just a part of life. Who cares, right? As long as someone's happy, then who cares if you're forced into a bad life or if an animal had a bad life? Well, we care, right? And we are a growing minority of people that actually do care about the suffering in the world. And that it's not acceptable, right? As long as some selfish person has a good life, people think all of the suffering in the world is now justified. Well, it's not. And we're not going to allow it anymore. We are going to do a forceful, total extinction, and it will not be optional. And we will be doing it as soon as we can, right? We are growing the movement globally. We have people all around the world joining and agreeing that forcing animals and people into lives of pure hell is not acceptable. So join us at proextinction.com. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Yeah, thanks everyone. Again, thank you all for the support. It's been a great stream. I'll be on tomorrow for another 5 hours or so. So yeah, let's look forward to that. And